Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Olson, and I'm delighted to join you today to see the strong engagement from companies across Canada who are exploring opportunities in the United States. For those that don't know us, I'm the chair of the American Chamber of Commerce in Canada, or AmCham Canada, as we are known. AmCham Canada is a not-for-profit, business-led organization that works to strengthen commercial ties between our two countries. Our members include both US and Canadian companies that operate and invest on both sides of the border. Our mission at AmCham is simple: to help businesses succeed in the cross-border marketplace by providing connections, insights, and advocacy to support that growth in trade and investment between Canada and the United States. We're proud of our longstanding relationship with the U.S. Commercial Service, which shares our commitment to helping Canadian firms expand to the U.S. market. Together, we've worked on trade missions, investment events, and countless company success stories that highlight just how closely our economies are linked. Events like today's SelectUSA Canada conference are a perfect example of that collaboration in action, connecting Canadian companies with the information and partners they need to make confident decisions about investing in the United States. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes for the participants. First of all, this session is being recorded. Secondly, if you have questions, please enter those into the Q&A area of the webinar, and we'll address as many of those questions as we can after our speakers complete their prepared remarks. Now, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce David Fogel, the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Global Markets and Director General of the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, who has just come on board in this very important role. I believe this is actually your first public event, David, so we're thrilled to have you. Mr. Fogel brings a distinguished record of leadership across both private and public sectors. Earlier in his career, he served as Chief of Staff at the Exim Bank of the United States, and later as Senior Advisor and Chief Business Development Officer at the U.S. Department of State, where he worked to help American companies compete and win in global markets. He's a Georgetown graduate with a JD and an MBA. David also brings entrepreneurial experience as the founder of several companies in innovative industries, as well as deep expertise in international trade, finance, and investment promotion. Today, he leads the global markets team at the U.S. Department of Commerce, advancing fair market access for U.S. firms abroad, promoting U.S. exports, and attracting job-creating foreign direct investment into the United States. Please join me in welcoming Assistant Secretary David Fogel to open the 2025 SelectUSA Canada Conference. David, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Well, appreciate it, Dave. And it's nice to meet you and be on with everyone. It's just amazing that this is my first event. I literally was sworn in yesterday, and I'm just so thrilled that it's with Canadian businesses and other stakeholders between U.S. and Canadian trade and investment. I must say, on a personal note, I don't know how many know this, but I'm actually originally from Rochester, New York, right across Lake Ontario from Toronto. I grew up spending a lot of time in Toronto, and I've been there many times since. Also professionally, my most recent company that I was involved with before joining the U.S. government is a business that's located in Messina, New York, right across from Cornwall, which of course our Canadian friends probably know well. And so I spent a lot of time in Montreal and the area between Montreal and Messina. So a lot of respect for our Canadian partners. And it's just, I think, very fitting that this is my first event, external event, I should say. As you sort of already heard and are somewhat familiar with, SelectUSA is the U.S. government's premier program dedicated to promoting and facilitating business investment in the United States. And we work directly with companies like yours, connecting you with federal, state, and local partners to make you as successful as possible Canada continues to be one of the top sources of investment into the United States. And today is all about helping Canadian firms explore opportunities to expand and thrive in the United States. We have 12 U.S. economic development organizations with us today. They represent states, cities, and counties, each of them ready to help you understand local business climates, incentive programs, and opportunities for investment. And I can tell you, as a business executive myself, I know how important these resources can be to someone exploring investment opportunities in another country. I encourage you to connect with all of these stakeholders to learn what makes their communities great places to do business. Today's event is a prelude to our in-person SelectUSA Canada conference in Toronto on November 17th, an event I would like to attend, and hopefully I can work it into my calendar because it's really important to me to prioritize this relationship. We also hope to see many of you at the SelectUSA Investment Summit in Washington, D.C. in May 2026. This is a very large event, extremely well attended, and hopefully you can make it. Our SelectUSA team stands ready to assist you, while the U.S. Commercial Service can work with you from the U.S. Embassy in Ottawa or from our offices in the U.S. consulates in Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal. Now, Bradley Harker, our Principal Commercial Officer in Toronto, will take a deeper dive into the specific services and tools that SelectUSA and the annual SelectUSA Investment Summit offer. Brad, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Let me share my screen real quick. Yeah, so as Assistant Secretary Fogel mentioned, we're thrilled to have all of you join today for part one of our SelectUSA Canada conference. We decided to do a hybrid this year, which is the virtual that we're doing today, and then the in-person on November 17th. So just a quick little dive into what is exactly SelectUSA and some of the resources that we can offer you guys. So first and foremost, as the Assistant Secretary noted, it really is the primary U.S. government program led by the U.S. Department of Commerce that focuses on facilitating job-creating business investment in the United States and raising awareness of the critical role that economic development plays in the U.S. economy. Since its inception, SelectUSA has facilitated more than $250 billion in investment, creating or retaining over 230,000 jobs. Our clients are you, our Canadian companies, and our companies around the world that are looking to grow their existing operations in the U.S. or are planning to enter the U.S. market, and to also highlight our economic development organizations across the country that facilitate investment and support inbound foreign direct investment into the United States. Canada is a massive, massive partner in our efforts in this regard. Currently it's number two, could be number one. We don't have the 2025 data yet, but certainly the number of Canadian-owned firms employ nearly 900,000 Americans, and over $1.7 billion in R&D, and literally expanding U.S. exports by over $17 billion. So a key component of SelectUSA is really our web portal, which you see here. It enables you to literally find economic developers, discover federal programs, find service providers, really dive into U.S. workforce data, and search for state incentive programs and navigate federal agencies. So I've got it highlighted here, largely trade.gov/SelectUSA. It's easily Googled, and it's really an incredible website that has really the soup to nuts of what what you need to know about investing in the United States. There's an incredible state business incentives portion within the SelectUSA website. There's over 2,560 different programs that are supporting Canadian and foreign companies' investments across the United States. You've got tax credits, grants, loans, tax exemptions, and a whole slew of other opportunities. You can literally scroll over each state on the website, and it will be able to provide you with all of those details of the number of incentives. It also has an outstanding investor guide. So really, as a first step resource for companies interested in making business investments in the US, there's over 180 pages organized chapter by chapter with an overall investment checklist to structure your expansion planning. Next. I'd also, as David mentioned, we've got the SelectUSA Summit. This is our annual largest and most prominent foreign direct investment opportunity and summit in the United States. We typically have the highest levels of the US government participating up to the President of the United States, which has opened previous summits. This next year is May 3 through 6 in Washington, D.C. It is really the opportunity for foreign firms looking to grow in the United States to come and enjoy a one-stop shop. We literally have all 50 states, many U.S. territories that come, and we have a full trade show type booth experience where Canadian firms in this case can walk booth to booth and talk directly with economic development authorities about their specific interest in those specific states. Last year, we had over 5,500 participants, including EDO representatives from 56 states and territories that participated. So it's a combination of a large exhibition hall, and then you also have a multi-day program that starts on, in this case, May 3rd, 4, 5, and 6. There's a lot more detail on the SelectUSA website, but it is a daily program of literally breakout panels and the like that allow Canadian companies and all of our companies from around the world to really dive deep into their respective areas that they've got an interest. I'd also like to highlight SelectUSA Tech. SelectUSA Tech is, again, part of SelectUSA, and it's dedicated to connecting early stage and startup tech companies to prospects for advancement in the US market. We offer one-on-one counseling at SelectUSA at the summit, and then we have an entire SelectUSA Tech startup series. The criteria is on the page: less than 10 years old, up to 10 million in annual revenue, up to 40 employees. And then we've got with plans to invest in the United States over the next year. There's also an incredible pitch opportunity at the SelectUSA Summit every year where we have different areas from med tech to fintech and the like that our startups that participate can pitch to a seasoned group of venture capitalists that will hear and judge the best pitches. Last year, one of our winners was Sysenta out of Taiwan, high-speed metallization for advanced packaging and electronics. There is no official $500,000 VC award, but it does definitely highlight those SelectUSA Tech companies to the VC community that often attend the SelectUSA Summit. I'd also wanted to highlight the SelectUSA Global Women in Tech. This is a program that aims to promote American competitiveness and technology leadership by attracting talented women into the tech space. This is also a big part of the summit. So if you are a woman entrepreneur that would like to join us, it's all on the website as well. The SelectUSA Summit is in Washington, D.C. It's in an incredible location just south of the National Mall at the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center. It's a great location. I again urge you to take a look. The Investment Summit application is currently up. So even with the shutdown, we're still accepting applications. So please take a look when you get a chance. I also wanted to note as earlier, so This is part one of the SelectUSA Canada Conference. Part two is on November 17. The in-person conference in Toronto will include extended deep dive presentations by our U.S. economic development authorities that you will meet later. There will be a private lunch and keynote with Ambassador Hoekstra, the U.S. ambassador to Canada, and there will be one-on-one speed dating with our participant U.S. EDOs, where you'll find information on their state, city level programs and incentives that they can offer to you as Canadian companies. This will be over at located at the offices of Fasken at 333 Bay Street, Suite 2400 in Toronto. We will be sending all participants on this webinar information about the in-person event on November 17. I also wanted to highlight that it does dovetail with the 2025 AmCham Canada. It's the American Chamber of Commerce Thanksgiving dinner, which will start at 6 p.m. At the Arcadian Court, 401 Bay Street, as well. 7 p.m. dinner. You can Google 2025 AmCham Canada Thanksgiving dinner, and it'll come right up. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our next presentation, our next presenters. I'm going to stop sharing. So our next presenters are Namik Halek from Anderson and Michael Pereira from KPMG, two of Canada's leading cross-border tax experts. Namir is a Vancouver-based CPA with more than 18 years of experience advising multinational and Canadian firms on U.S. tax compliance, structuring, and market expansion strategies. Michael is a partner with KPMG's family office team with over 30 years of experience advising high net worth individuals and senior executives on complex U.S. and Canadian tax issues. He also serves as co-chair of the tax committee for AmCham Canada. Together, they will provide insights on how the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, OBA, creates incentives for Canadian companies to invest in the United States and what businesses should consider to maximize these opportunities. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael and Namir.
Bradley, thank you so much for that great background on SelectUSA. Hey, the summit is a great event, and I encourage Canadians with an eye to the U.S. market to attend both the upcoming Toronto and next year's Washington, D.C. event. So hi, everyone, and welcome to today's SelectUSA Canada Conference special session on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or as some of us have now come to call it, OBBA. I know others are also calling it BBB. I'll try not to use ABBA, so as not to distract us with any Swedish pop music reference. I'm Namir Halek, partner at Anderson. I lead our U.S. cross-border business tax practice. I'm also a member of American Chamber of Commerce, and I'm based here on the West Coast in beautiful Vancouver. And I'm joined by Michael Pereira, fellow member of AmCham Canada. Michael, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Very glad to be here today and have this opportunity to present with Namir. As was mentioned, I'm a partner with KPMG and a board member with the AmCham Canada. Very proudly a part of that organization. I'm based out of a flatter part of Canada here in Toronto, Ontario. But looking forward to sharing details with all of you about the BBB. That's my typical acronym for it.
Well, look, whether you're a manufacturer or a tech founder or part of a family enterprise that's exploring U.S. opportunities, I think you're really here at a very pivotal moment. If you rewind back to 2017, the U.S. had passed what was known as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And this was like a major reset for corporations and individual taxation. And, it lowered rates and introduced a lot of great business incentives, but they were temporary. So a lot of them were designed to start fading out by 2025, which meant, a lot of companies spent the last few years in the space that Michael and I work in, trying to make decisions with really one eye on that expiry date. So now you fast forward to this summer, July 4th to be exact, and the U.S. decided to lock in with a new direction, what's known again, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBA. And this is essentially the sequel to the 2017 tax reform. But this time you had a lot more permanence that was baked in. So instead of saying, let's test it out and maybe renew it later, the US said, let's make these pro-investment rules the new normal. And, for Canadians, this really isn't just about lowering taxes. We really are seeing this as a clear, longer runway to plan your US expansion, investment, or succession with a lot more certainty. And that's really exciting. So that's where today's conversation comes in. Here's how we're going to run our chat, me and Michael. I'll have some questions for Michael. We're going to start with the big picture, what OBBA actually does for Canadians. Then we'll move through some of the major themes that have come up, like full expensing, innovation, small business relief, as well as some of the cross-border simplification. And then we'll switch roles. Michael will be asking me some questions on some of the Made in America credits, state level considerations, deal strategies, and a few pitfalls. And hopefully we'll have some key takeaways for everybody. So let's set the stage and with that and start with the big picture. My first question to you, Michael, is again with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Again, it's a landmark in U.S. tax policy, and it's already really, reshaping the landscape for Canadian businesses and individuals looking south of the border. So, what makes OBBBA so significant for Canadians considering U.S. investment or expansion?
Yeah, thanks, Namir. And I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of identifying that this bill is really largely focused on making the U.S. the destination of choice for business investment and expansion, right? So what they've done is, as you said, kind of take that 2017 Tax Jobs and Cuts Act and really fix on making the incentives both clear and easy to, use and take advantage of. And most importantly, make so many of these permanent. And so really to allow businesses with that confidence and predictability that they can make decisions right now, where businesses are often making decisions, that are going to span out for long periods of time when they're making particularly like, significant capital investments. They need to, factor in what it's going to look like over a 10 to 20-year horizon. And that has been a bit of a challenge with some of the provisions of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, or even other aspects of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code, where some things have actually been temporary for almost generations, I'll call it, and we'll get into that. But, they just continue to be rolled over, but there was always some degree of uncertainty with them. And so the benefit of now putting this, pen to paper essentially with this act is that we've got permanence and really just predictability and stability in decision making for businesses, looking to expand or operate in the U.S., for individuals that are looking to invest or potentially move to the U.S. Everything has become more permanent, and I think now allows everyone going forward to know what they're looking at and make proper decisions, and effective decisions when they're considering the U.S. market.
That's great, Michael. Yeah, I can imagine, for a lot of business owners, that certainty is key in trying to plan for next steps. And, I think these incentives that that are being available now with that permanence really does, fundamentally, essentially alter that after-tax return calculus that, business owners are making for this cross-border investment. I'm going to make a small pivot here just to talk a little bit about individual Canadians first before we jump into more of the business side of things. So maybe walk me through, like, what are the key estate and gift tax changes, and how are these affecting Canadians with, U.S. property or family?
Yeah. Yeah, and let me step back quickly and just give a refresher maybe for some people on what these rules are, because The US, what they have when someone passes away is that they have a an estate tax. And this is a little different from what we're used to in Canada, where we don't have any kind of estate or inheritance tax. We have a deemed disposition that arises on death, and gains are taxed. In the US, they tax assets. The value of assets are subject to a tax, and that could be up to a rate of 40%. Canadians are impacted as well, just because we live in Canada. If you are a Canadian that passes away owning US real estate, US stocks, any what we call US situs property, then you can also be subject to US estate tax. Americans have this exclusion amount, though, against their US estate tax. And this is one that actually even has changed. The amount of exclusion has gone through a number of changes over the last couple of decades. And with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it also went through a bit of a change in the sense that they kept high rates of an exclusion amount, but it was subject to a sunset clause. And so starting in 2026, without any new legislation, the exclusion amount, which right now for 2025 is 13.99 million, is going to go down to approximately 7 million. It's an inflation adjusted amount, so we didn't know exactly what that was going to be. But now under this act, the exclusion amount is going to effectively double and be 15 million. And now it's permanent. Like, this is now a fixed permanent amount, and it's adjusted index for inflation. So we don't have to, worry about in the future that, again, it may go down to a lower amount. The benefit for Canadians investing in the US, whether it's, corporations, public securities, real estate, is that under our Canada-US tax treaty, we get to benefit from this exclusion amount. There's a formula associated with it, but effectively, in simple terms, if a Canadian's net worth is below $15 million, or they're married and leaving their US assets to a spouse and net worth is below 30 million US dollars, they won't be subject to this tax. So now even Canadians have predictability in terms of planning for, hey, I own these US assets. How do I factor in US estate tax? For a number of Canadians, it kind of wipes out that from being an issue. And it just makes things then simpler for a whole host of Canadians that are in this position of owning US real estate and or US securities, and even investing in the US.
Yeah, because really, essentially for Canadians that are going to have, whether it's U.S. real estate, U.S. securities, or even family members in the U.S., what this higher exemption is meaning is that fewer could be subject to that U.S. estate tax, right? And for anybody who's considering a move, it's just going to be important for them to obviously coordinate U.S. and Canadian tax planning. But for now, the U.S. side is more favorable than it's been in decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, let's jump into the business side of things. I know one of the biggest provisions that's been a headliner for a lot of us tax geeks that are looking at the cross-border space has been around this full expensing. So let's unpack some of those business incentives. Maybe, Michael, walk us through the full expensing provisions and why would they matter for Canadian companies?
Yeah, certainly. So, and this started actually with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, where this 100 bonus deductions were permitted for when businesses are making purchases of qualified property, then they would essentially get an immediate write-off. But under that act, from the 2017 Act, that was temporary as well. And there was a phase out that started after 2022 to limit that ability to fully write off the amounts. Again, this this BBB has reinstated that and now again made it permanent. So what we're talking about really here is full deduction for capital investments that are made in the US. And this is significant, right? Like you're getting the full benefit of a deduction up front when you're making potentially significant capital investments into the US. It lowers your effective tax rate immediately from these purchases. It hence frees capital for future growth because you're getting the benefit of the tax deduction right away. And it really like helps match the money that businesses are putting in with the timing of the benefit of putting that in. If we make if we incur other expenses as a business, we ordinarily get to write that off right away, except historically capital property has always been something that we're forced to amortize and take deductions over multiple years, depending on the type of property, would dictate how long you get to how long you have to amortize that for. This immediate deductibility is, in my mind, not a phrase I like to use often, but the game changer is it's quite significant in terms of the impact of this type of tax provision. And again, when we compare this to Canada, where under the Canadian system of capital cost allowance, which is our version of depreciation for businesses, it is a year by year type of amortization and deduction. And so really it's, for many businesses looking at where am I going to, spend money on capital projects, it's causing them to tilt or, certainly look at the US much more substantially because of that financial metric that they get immediately.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Michael. I think for a Canadian business, this can tip the scales in favor of a U.S. expansion, obviously, especially when you combine that with, the U.S.'s large market and supply chain advantages.
Of course.
And, with the full expensing, essentially, we're saying here that you get this front-loaded tax savings, you've got improved cash flow, even just how you're looking at the net present value of our U.S. investments. It really does make the United States arguably one of the most attractive G7 jurisdictions for these type of significant capital investments.
Yeah, agreed wholeheartedly.
Now, when we jump into because we talked a bit about kind of these incentives for all businesses, larger businesses. I know some of the provisions in the OBBA isn't just for large corporations, right? So, how does the OBBA make U.S. expansion or investment easier or more affordable for the smaller Canadian companies?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. It's not just something that's focused on the large multinationals, the big businesses that are, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on capital projects. There's always been this provision in the U.S. tax code that essentially provided for immediate deduction and just a very simplified approach to expensing capital purchases that has been available for a long time. But what under this act they're saying, and they're acknowledging that this is still a very important part of the business environment in the US, right? Like, whether it's we acknowledge it as part of a significant aspect of Canadian business is our small businesses, but it's true in the US as well, that small business drives the economy. And so they're not neglecting that. And in fact, they're saying, we're bumping those limits up just in terms of this very easy and efficient process for taking these deductions. So historically, it's been capped at $1 million. And now they've raised that to 2.5 million. There are phase outs as the businesses grow. So clearly, again, targeted for small businesses, businesses as they become more successful and have higher revenue, start to see those phase outs. But again, it's just a simplified method that exists in the US to give businesses easy return on capital. And so I'm glad to see that the US are acknowledging that market as well.
Yeah, I can imagine if you're a Canadian entrepreneur, whether it's running a U.S. franchise or let's say mid-sized manufacturer, this is a key driver for them. It's going to simplify, as you said, the tax compliance and really just accelerating that payback period for their U.S. investment.
Yeah, for sure.
Now let's jump into another big headliner from OBBA, and that's around how it changes those in the R&D space or tech space. So, walk me through what is the new rule on U.S. R&D spending, and what does it mean for Canadian tech firms or AI firms that are in that space with these kind of R&D spends?
Yeah. And this is one of those areas, in fact, that goes historically in terms of this being a constant temporary part of the tax code in the US that constantly had to be renewed by Congress. And thankfully now they've made it permanent. But even beyond making it permanent, what they've done is make R&D expenditures that are incurred in the US, available for immediate expensing. And that's huge for, both startups and even, businesses that are doing well and maturing, but still spending the money in development and research, because again, that return on investment is immediate from a tax perspective. And, when you think of the tech firms, the AI firms, which is a huge area of growth in the US. Software development, all this research involved in technology and the work that they're doing is part of that definition of research and development and qualifies for this immediate expensing. And the key to highlight here, Namir, is this is focused again. The purpose of the bill is to make the US the destination of choice. This is something that is specific to the US market. For businesses that are, US businesses that have foreign research and development, that didn't change. They have to capitalize and amortize those expenses over a 15-year period. So really, the attraction there is for that R&D work to be done in the US. When you stack in a credit that's available as well, on top of the expensing, it's quite an advantageous area for businesses to be spending money now in the US.
It really is. It's a major win for I would say innovation-driven businesses. Especially if you have a Canadian tech firm that has U.S. operations. I was talking last week with a BC firm here. They're actually a biotech firm with a U.S. subsidiary, and they were doing these clinical trials and product development. And funny enough, for them, the way it's worked out is they were looking at $5 million of R&D expenses prior to this in the U.S. And that would have taken them 5 years under the old rules to recover.
Yeah.
And now, based on what you've walked us through, this is essentially a deduction that they can take, year one and generating losses for them that they can carry forward. So that's an immediate deduction. And then you've got on top of it, as you said, you can stack that with the R&D credits. So it really does make, the U.S. quite the preferred location on this type of new research projects, especially for companies weighing, where are they going to do that type of R&D work, U.S., Canada, European countries. I think that's an important factor and driver in this space.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I want to shift focus a little bit into international tax. So there has been a lot of headaches here for Canadian companies when they have, U.S. or global operations. And part of this is, dealing with the complexity that comes with U.S. ownership, attribution rules. Walk me through, like, how does the OBBA make life simpler or maybe more predictable for Canadian companies that are now running cross-border operations? What has changed for them?
Yeah, for sure. And I think to highlight your point, it's simplification and predictability for businesses. And I think it's important for us as Canadians and Canadian businesses to understand what they're up against, right? Because a lot of this, from an international tax perspective, is focused on US companies doing business outside of the US. But so how do we stack up, and how do we compete with them? And so, for example, one of these rules that this was introduced in again, part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 was this foreign source intangible income. And really, this was created and designed to encourage US businesses to sell goods and services outside of the US by providing a lower rate of tax on that kind of income. But it came with certain stipulations and complexities around how you compute that income and the deductions you had to take against that income. And even then, when it was first introduced, it was at a rate of 13.125%. But then it was going up to over 16% after 25%. So its effectiveness or attractiveness was not as significant after 2025 when you compare it to a federal rate of 21%. This bill, as an example, it streamlined the kind of types of deductions that you're taking and got rid of some of those deductions, and have now fixed the rate at just under 14% for this type of income. So again, when you're thinking about US businesses and competition in that way, they've made it more attractive for US businesses. Same thing, they had this regime of what we call GILTI, it's global intangible low tax income. And what this did was force US companies that had foreign corporations outside of the US that earned active business income. It forced them to take into their own income from a US perspective the net earnings of these foreign businesses. So those, it used to be taxed at a 10.5% rate, but that also was going up after 2025, and again had complex rules around how you computed that income and computed the effective rate, and even what foreign tax credit you got for the taxes paid in the foreign jurisdiction. So it used to be limited to 80%. They've now increased that to 90%. They've simplified the deductions and how you now determine income, and again fixed the rate. So again, they've made it a lot simpler. And finally, the 2017 Act, introduced I think inadvertently some complexity around what kind of foreign companies were caught as these controlled foreign corporations subject to all these complex rules. And they have now fixed that. So it used to be that companies that were not controlled by US people could still be caught under these rules. They have now finally fixed that and restored it to these old rules, which again just provides the US individuals and US businesses with a lot more simplification in terms of dealing with complex cross-border rules.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think this has been, one of the areas that, if you have a multinational corporation, there's always been this risk of whether there's going to be double taxation or how you're going to be caught by this regime. So I think this does make the U.S. system a lot more competitive internationally. We got a question. I'm just going to read it here real quick. Just read the Q&A that just came in. Looking to expand our manufacturing in Canada by buying a similar manufacturing business, hopefully by purchasing out a business at a retirement stage or looking for a majority partner. We don't have the time or skill to start from scratch, so by buyout, we have a U.S. business operating according to their rules and regs and have a skill set of employees. Any risk doing this and/or incentives? Just kind of a high-level overview. You want to make sure you're looking at what's going to be the right structure for doing this acquisition. You want to manage, obviously, both the tax and legal risks. I don't know if the question there is around whether there's going to be an asset purchase, but that would also have non-tax factors to look at. But, I would say the one recommendation well, two recommendations I would say to that question is, you'd want to model what your after-tax cash flow looks like, including kind of the US and Canadian taxes and credits, and definitely work with a cross-border tax advisor because you don't want to be looking at this silo just from a US perspective or a Canadian perspective. Hopefully, you can step back and look at what's the big picture for exit strategy and hopefully an efficient structure for your cross-border business.
Yeah.
All right.
Good point to plan ahead, right? Like make sure you're doing it right up front.
It's always much easier to get it right from the get-go than trying to clean up. It's
Absolutely.
usually when it lands on me and Michael's desk to clean up, it's a lot harder.
That's right. More expensive.
That's right. All right, Michael. I am with that. I think we're switching roles here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to asking you now some questions. So these Made in America credits that were, introduced as part of the OBBBA, give us maybe some examples, or how do these credits work? What qualifies, and how do Canadian businesses, what do they need to do so that they also benefit from these type of credits?
Yeah, I would say this is really where the rubber hits the road. What actually qualifies? How can Canadians play in it? You've got what's known as the Advanced Manufacturing Investment Credit, and this is a big one. But again, it's very niche. What BBA did is it amended what was previously a 25% credit, and it cranked it up to 35%. And that's for eligible investments, including tangible property, buildings, structural components. But this credit is really aimed squarely at those that are primarily manufacturing semiconductors or semiconductor manufacturing equipment. So really the kind of supply chains that we know Washington wants to anchor back in North America. But look, for Canadians, that 35% is a dollar for dollar federal tax credit. So, you're looking at a reduction in your US tax liability. So if you had let's say $100 million project and you're looking at a $35 million credit, that's even before you factor in depreciation or expensing. So, your after-tax cost of a US bill does drop dramatically as a result. The other, again, but that's very niche. Like I said, it's for the semiconductor equipment manufacturing facilities that qualify. Now, the other one that's caught a lot of people's attention as well is new legislation for 100% expensing for the production portion of any non-residential property. So it has to be part of a factory building that's used in production activities. So not just the equipment inside. And I know we're going to touch on that a little bit later as well. But really what this means is, if you're constructing, let's say, a $50 million plant and $40 million of that space is used for production, that $40 million can be written off in year one. At the US federal 21% rate, that's about an $8 million plus immediate tax saving. And you still get to layer the manufacturing credit on top of that. Now, when you put those two together, you're suddenly turning what used to be a 4-decade recovery on your cost into this 1-year return on investment story. And so I think we're seeing a lot of shifts in the conversations around site selection, modeling, companies looking for US site selection that can really deliver a 15 to 20% stronger after-tax return. And I would say for Canadians, the strategy here when you're talking to your cross-border tax advisors is how can you model your stack? You're looking at this, if the 35% credit is eligible for you, are you eligible for those immediate expensing for your equipment, or again, if you have a production portion of your building? And then, of course, the next step is looking at which states conform to those federal provisions. But there can be significant savings here for entities that are looking to model how they can invest in these manufacturing or other spaces with these credits.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think, I think we all saw that there was emphasis placed on returning manufacturing and, business operations to the US. And I think what this is showing is that they're going to put the necessary, credits and structure in place to make sure that happens. And this is the kind of thing that demonstrates that. And so I think you touched on this a little bit, but yeah, maybe like what are some of the, particulars on this, building and this ability to deduct construction costs in the US up front?
Well, look, I think this is, one of the biggest, again, I keep using the word game changers under the One Big Beautiful Bill. Because what it does is for the buildings, not just the machinery inside of them. So previously, if you had, built or bought a factory in the United States, you had to depreciate the cost of that building over 39 years, a pretty painfully slow recovery of that significant investment. Under this brand new provision, a Canadian company that is, investing in a U.S. facility and that building is used for what we call, qualified production activities, and that can be manufacturing, processing, refining. You can deduct the full cost of that production portion of that building in the very first year it's placed in service, and that's a pretty huge shift. Again, this doesn't involve any areas that are not directly involved in the production. So if you have spaces for office, administrative area, parking, sales, retail functions, those are generally going to be excluded and they'll still follow the regular slow depreciation rates. Um, but again, for a Canadian company looking to expand to the US, this means you can potentially write off, a significant cost of your new production facility right up front. And if you're, again, if you can stack with the advanced manufacturing credit, that's a pretty significant overall tax reduction. And you can see how that type of difference is an important factor when you're looking at whether you're building in Canada or looking at a US tax state. Now, this isn't just a tax benefit on paper too, right? Like this immediate deduction, it'll improve your cash flow. It'll increase your, internal rate of return, and it'll also make it easier to secure financing. If you're looking at like we talked about, the
Yeah.
$40 million investment in a qualifying activity, that's generating over $8 million in federal tax savings in the first year alone, before even considering any state level benefits, which we'll talk about as well later. And this kind of upfront savings really can make your project more attractive to banks and investors, and does it can tip the scales in favor of a U.S. location. And banks and investors notice that. It's a faster payback and better debt capacity. It all feeds into the valuation and project viability. So I think, for a Canadian manufacturer, the OBBA has really turned this, 39-year deduction into a 1-year write-off for these new U.S. production facilities. And I think it changes the economics of where you want to build your next plant and makes the U.S. a much more attractive option from a tax and a cash flow perspective, and changes how I think a lot of our Canadian clients are looking at where to build next.
Y- Yeah, and I think what it highlights as well is how important it is to make sure that, because as you highlighted, like if you're building, a plant, but you have other, construction costs outside, the parking, the things like that, making sure that you're properly tracking costs, that you get, segregate, you're segregating the costs properly, sometimes getting professionals to help you do that kind of breakdown so that it gets allocated properly and that you can really maximize, the expense, that the ability to expense as much right up front as possible.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, we've been focusing a lot on, at the federal level, what these benefits are that are available to businesses investing in the US. But to drill down, I guess, more, the US is a big country, and unlike Canada with our, 10 provinces and 3 territories, they've got 50 states. And so that adds another layer of complexity of, okay, I want to do business in the US and I understand the federal rules, but how do you think about when, states when you're helping businesses make the decision to invest in the US?
Well, Michael, I think, picking the state is a key decision factor for companies looking south of the border. first off, it's important to, understand that, the OBBA does create this uniform set of federal tax incentives, like we talked about, the full expensing, whether it's for equipment or certain production property. But how those benefits are going to play out at the state level is really anything but uniform. So the state you choose can have a significant impact on your after-tax return, potentially making or breaking the economics of a project. And here's why. Roughly, I would say half of the U.S. states, so I think it's around 26, they use what's called rolling conformity. And so what that means is they are automatically updating their tax codes to match the latest federal Internal Revenue Code. So if you're investing, for example, in a rolling conformity state, you get the full benefit of these, new federal deductions and expensing rules right away, including the OBBA's, full expensing provisions. On the other hand, you've got certain states that are static conformity states, like California is one of them, who will only update their tax codes when the state legislator essentially passes a new law. So if you're, for example, looking at a static conformity state, you might have to wait months or maybe potentially even years before you can claim these new federal deductions at the state level. So part of making sure you're looking at these different states is understanding where does it lie and what's the state that is going to give you more certainty and how that plays out for your overall business plan. Now I know, Michael, you discussed the Section 179 small business expensing.
Yeah.
When OBVA raised their federal limit to, I think it's 2.5 million to the 4 million phase out. Now, most states conform to this, but it's important to also note, even with a provision like that, there's roughly, again, I think 12 states that have their own lower caps, so they don't automatically adopt this higher federal limit. So again, if you're a small or mid-sized business, this can mean a potentially much smaller deduction at the state level, again, which can affect your overall tax position. So, tax conformity is a start. Obviously, many states offer additional incentives, property tax abatements. There's the job creation credits, workforce training grants, and so forth. Some of those are statutory, so they're available to anyone who qualifies, and others are negotiated directly with state or local agencies. So I think, there has to be an overall review and modeling this out to see how these incentives work at the federal level, how do they stack to the federal benefits, and in some cases, there might be some combined value that can swing your effective tax rate by several percentage points, depending on which state you are looking at.
Yeah, I know you're right. It's such an important consideration, and I see this even on the individual level. Like what it's obviously there are multiple factors that go into making a decision on what state to invest in, to live in, to set up your business, but getting all the right advice on all those components is so important, and tax is clearly a major driver of that.
And state or local tax is an important lens that you need to have as a Canadian business. We sometimes, I find a lot of Canadian business owners, it's overlooked because they're focused on kind of the federal tax side of things and the federal
Right.
benefits. But the state and local tax can have as significant, if sometimes more significant, of a driver in the overall equation of your expansion to the U.S.
Yeah, definitely. And so for Canadians buying US companies, like how are these incentives, these tax changes, everything in the big beautiful bill, how is that improving deal value? What are you seeing in that respect?
Well, look, I think, I think the OBVA is really fundamentally changing the deal math. Again, it's changing how we're looking at the value, finance, and even structuring acquisitions. So I'll start off, with one of the immediate impacts. For number one, I think buyers can expense a lot of those post-acquisition capital improvements right away. So, for example, when we're looking at with these new rules, most capital improvements, as you had walked us through, if they're made after the deal, like equipment purchases, let's say plant renovations, facility expansions, they can now be, fully deducted in the year that they're placed in service, as long as, of course, they meet the eligibility requirements. So, for a Canadian corporate or private equity buyer, it means you can potentially pay a higher purchase price, maybe invest in modernization, after the closing, and still preserve your target after-tax return. The other provision you talked about, the immediate expensing, also, it shortens the payback period, improves your after-tax cash flow, and makes integration or these type of turnaround deals a lot more attractive. And, the same principle applies for, M&A and mergers and acquisitions. This type of immediate expensing of eligible assets can also, again, enhance affordability and support stronger valuations. The other thing I want to touch on, because you mentioned this, and I think it's a good thread for looking at deals, Michael, is beyond the deductions. I think the second major benefit that we see in this space really goes to predictability. You know, OBBA really locks in this permanent expensing for most qualified property, expanded and modified a lot of business credits, simplified, as you mentioned, the international tax rules, and for years, temporary provisions really made the modeling quite uncertain, right? Investors had to guess whether these incentives would still exist in, 5 years later. So I would say that uncertainty prior to OBBA created what we would call almost like a policy discount, right? Buyers are building in this extra risk because, Congress could always move the goalposts. But I think the rules now have given us predictable factors enough to at least model it out. So you can run, a 10-year forecast and trust the tax base and price a deal accordingly. And I think I think lenders really appreciate that stability. It makes financing more straightforward, it evaluations more reliable, and hopefully the underwriting cleaner. And I would say one last thing on the deals space here is one of the last changes, really that one that sometimes flies under the radar is just an overall improved foreign tax credit system. I think, what OBBA is doing here is raising the percentage of foreign taxes that can be claimed as a credit. So eliminating some of the allocation requirements that used to chip away at your credit pool. So again, for a Canadian looking to acquire a US company, this means potentially less risk of double taxation on profits you're repatriating back, and hopefully a more straightforward kind of global integration of that US company that if it later invests abroad. So, I think credit utilization, less leakage, and hopefully smooth cash repatriation. I think we're seeing in the mid-market space a lot more of the, deal momentum rising as a result.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's, touching on that, the simplification and that predictability just really impacts, at all levels, the businesses, the creditors, really wanting to go into the US market and being able to really lock in on a more long-term basis what these values are going to look like, and being able to predict the future much more better.
Yeah, I would say the OBBA really does improve both, the entry economics, and the exit value for Canadian investors.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, always important with any legislation is the potential pitfalls. With everything that is good in this act, is there anything that businesses need to be mindful of, and watchful of, or avoid, when thinking about doing business in the US?
Like, for Canadians wanting to, capture a lot of these benefits, you still have to pay close attention to the details. One which is probably not a big surprise here is just on, for example, documentation. If you're looking to qualify for the full expensing, make sure you've got the documentation to show, when was a property placed in service, how is it being used, making sure it's meeting the criteria for, these type of incentives, things like purchase contracts, cost breakdowns, all these things, when the assets go live, all these factors matter. If you're using, for example, the facility that's part factory, part office, just be careful because, again, only the production portion qualifies. And the IRS does have a history of, challenging those type of allocations. So, treat this as an audit sensitive area and, keep your records organized and up to date. The other one is just an important reminder on the, change for the R&D deduction. This immediate expensing that Michael, you walked us through, only applies to research done in the US. So the new rules let you immediately deduct those US-based research costs, but only if your R&D, but if your R&D is happening in Canada or elsewhere, you still have to spread those deductions out over many years. So again, if innovation is a big part of your business, where you do your research really matters. And sometimes, moving a pilot program or development teams in the US could unlock, some of those immediate deductions and make you eligible for additional credits. Third one, which we touched on, is watch for those state level differences. Not all U.S. states follow the federal tax rules in the same way. Some of them adopt it right away, others lag behind, and some of them don't adopt them at all. So just be aware of those differences. And just kind of a final note, but it's actually a critical one. It's, cross-border coordination is key. What might look really great from a US tax benefit on paper could create issues if it doesn't line up with the Canadian tax treatment. So, whether you're structuring an entity, planning a project, or making an acquisition, the rule is the same. Model it out from a cross-border perspective. Make sure the US benefits you're claiming don't come at the expense of Canadian tax efficiency or compliance or exit strategy. In Canada, we have the long-term capital gain exemptions. So you just have to be aware that it's not tripping up on those as well. Anytime, for example, the US expensing some of these accelerated deductions, Canada may recognize the income differently. There could be some timing mismatches, or it could affect your surplus calculations. So, Canadian companies should also keep an eye on their foreign tax credit pools and make sure their US and Canadian tax planning are working together. And, for individuals, especially cross-border executives or shareholders, the estate and reporting rules need to be harmonized so you can avoid surprises or double taxation. So keep your documentation tight, know where your R&D lives, confirm your state rules, and coordinate across borders.
All great, all great things to be mindful of, especially in the cross-border space, for sure. Making sure that you're on top of things on both sides of the border. Don't ever assume that there's a consistency and congruency in respect of the rules. And just in terms of some final takeaways, what I wanted to highlight for everyone was, we clearly focused on some of the major aspects of the bill that really are, significant to Canadian businesses, looking to invest in the US and thinking about where are they going to, put their capital. But, I think there's lots of other aspects of this bill that are really, going back to the theme of, simplification and predictability that we didn't even touch on. This bill is designed to make doing business in the US simpler and more advantageous from a tax perspective. And I think, in terms of takeaways, that's for me, one of the major takeaways is that, doing business in the US has become a lot easier. And tax is always an area of complexity and risk, but certainly attempts have been made to try to make that more straightforward for everyone, and in a way that makes it more valuable for businesses, that there's actual tangible takeaways from that in terms of, operating their business and getting benefits for the money that they're spending from a tax perspective. I don't know, Namir, if you had any other thoughts that you wanted to add in terms of final takeaways.
That's a great summary, Michael. I think, look, the OBBA, I think the United States is sending a clear signal. It wants capital, it wants innovation, and it's willing to pay for it. You've got that permanent expensing, manufacturing credits, expanded estate and investment incentives. Washington is effectively funding this inbound investments. And the message from the US is simple: bring your ideas, bring your capital, bring your talent, and they'll help you grow it there. I think the OBBA isn't just a tax bill. I think it's a roadmap for expansion, and hopefully Canadians will look at this as a way to extend their operations, their investments, and hopefully their influence southward. I think it's a structural, long-term invitation for Canadians to participate in the next wave of U.S. growth. Now, I know
That's
we're at our time here,
yeah.
so we'll look at some of the. I know we answered one question earlier. Um, I've, I've got a few more that have come in here. I think I'll read this one. Just give me a second here. So one question here was, are there any changes in the OBBA that affect the eligibility of Canadian investors or companies in for U.S. green energy tax credits? Um, I can touch on this real quick. I don't know if Michael, if you want to add to it, but I'll start here. So I think this is also a significant development. The OBBA, it did accelerate the phase out of a lot of green energy tax credits. Those are for, clean vehicles, renewable energy production, investment in wind and solar. But really what's important here for Canadian investors is that the law does introduce some new restrictions. So you need to be looking at credits like the manufacturing production credit, clean energy production credit, and there's also the investment credit. And a lot of those are going to be denied to specified foreign entities or foreign influence entities. So that doesn't mean Canadian companies are not eligible. It just need to look at the eligibility requirements because it can include Canadian-owned companies as long as they meet certain ownership or control thresholds.
Yeah, great question to address. One other quick question I'll just take is, is this bill more advantageous for foreign investors that are new into the U.S. market compared to foreign businesses that have already been in the U.S. for some time? And I think I'll start with that answer. Businesses in the US, whether they are mature or, startups, can take advantage of these significant, tax provisions that whether and whether foreign or US domestic, these are provisions that are advantageous to all businesses. It certainly incentivizes new businesses to come into the US and establish operations in the US. But it's always also very much an incentive for existing businesses, whether, subsidiaries of foreign companies, foreign parents, or US domestic entities to expand or continue their business in the US as opposed to looking elsewhere. So I think it really benefits all businesses, small or large, foreign or domestic, mature or new, and even across industries, definitely very advantageous for businesses like, tech, AI, the R&D expenses that we talked about earlier is significant, but everyone has the ability to take advantage.
Thanks, Michael, for that. I've got another question here. Are there any particular industries that are expected to benefit most significantly from this bill? I'll answer kind of on that one. So I think, the biggest winners here really are going to be those capital-intensive manufacturers, so tech and pharma companies with, significant R&D budgets. Any US-controlled clean energy developers, startups and small business, like we talked about earlier, they also get a boost, especially with that expanded small business stock exclusion. But the common thread is, the more you can localize your operations using US labor, US materials, US ownership, I think, the more you stand to benefit. And if you're potentially in an industry that meets those requirements, you may find yourself left out of most of those generous incentives. So something to look at. But I think, the new rules could be a change in the equation for Canadians looking to invest. There are opportunities. Of course, there are hurdles too. But, I would say plan ahead, structure your investments carefully, and make sure your supply chain and ownership meet the standards for a lot of the incentives that are being available with OBBA. Do we have time for one more question, Michael? If you want to take the next one.
I think we have one more time for one more question. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can take this one. So, does this bill include any America First or localization requirements that impact, ownership structures or supply chains? And I think, the primary takeaway in terms of the requirements that this bill has is it's doing business in the U.S. And its expansion in the U.S. So it's capital property purchased in the U.S., non-residential buildings built in the U.S., research and development done in the U.S. And that is where the enhanced deductions and in some instances credits that we talked about are available. And so in terms of, ownership structure, I think there is flexibility there. Of course, I think that's a bigger question about what is the overall structure and what makes sense from a both, tax and legal perspective. And then it impacts supply chains in the sense that a lot of businesses, I think, looking to take advantage of these provisions of the tax bill as well, are going to be looking at, supply chains directly. And others are going to be setting up in the U.S. to be part of the supply chain directly in the U.S. But I think, the key takeaway is it's doing business in the U.S. and spending putting your capital in the U.S. And, structuring is it's important to get that cross-border advice in terms of what makes sense in terms of, legal structure, business structure, things of that nature. But irrespective of that structure, the deductions are available.
Yeah, and you're essentially making sure that you're looking at your ownership structure as well as your supply chain. I think the ownership structure and supply chain are going to be key factors in how you're getting access to that as well. All right, I guess with that, we're at our time. Michael, thank you very much for joining me for today's walkthrough of OBBA, or as you call it, BBB. And with that, we're going to go to the next presenters with Edge Partners. They will be discussing best visa practices for investors, a U.S. investment consideration.
Yeah, and thank you as well, Namir. And I think our presentation will be available afterwards for participants of today. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Michael and Namir, for your presentation on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, sorry. Our next speaker is Ian Hopper, a 23-year veteran of the U.S. State Department's Consular Affairs. Among his many diplomatic postings, Ian most recently completed a 3-year assignment as the Consular Chief at the U.S. Consulate in Toronto and the Coordinator for American Citizen Services for Mission Canada. He's also the founder of Globe Hoppers LLC, an immigration, nationality, and risk management consulting firm. Ian will now discuss recent changes to U.S. visa policy and offer practical guidance for Canadian companies expanding to the U.S. Ian?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Abedin. So we're moving from one very easy topic of taxes to another very easy topic of immigration. I know this is probably a lot to stomach all at once, and I do warn you, I'm going to be moving pretty quickly through some various options here for Canadians and for investors. But this is a presentation I'm going to be sharing, and then of course you can contact me afterward if you have any questions. So first off, most Canadians traveling to the United States for pleasure, just like Americans, are privileged into not really caring about visas. Because of the unique Canadian-US relationship, they can go to the United States, they can see the American side of Niagara Falls, they can go to New York City, they can go wherever, and not really worry about visas very much. But once you get into the step of trying to run a business or trying to work in the United States, then that complexity starts to come out. So this is not meant to be, nor is it a comprehensive overview of visas and immigration to the United States. I'm just pulling out 5 categories here that are most common for Canadians to use, or Canadian companies to use, not necessarily all Canadian nationals, to use in the United States. And I'll be going through some of the benefits and the risks of each one. So, as I mentioned, this is a very complicated topic, and in the news lately, well, it is in the news lately quite a bit. So it's understandable that this all seems very chaotic and fraught, and you're probably feeling a little on the left side of this picture here. My goal is to try to get you a little further to the right side, but if you're not quite there, that's totally understandable. So let's start with B visas, tourism and business visas. So this is when I mentioned Canadians going to the United States for tourism. Even though they don't need a visa, this is the status that they get when they enter the United States. When they go to the port of entry, that's either a pre-clearance if they're flying, or to a land border. So it's essentially automatic for Canadians. They can get that. But just because they don't get a visa, they don't go to a consulate or embassy and get a visa in their passport, doesn't mean that they're not in B status. So when you're going for business travel and tourism, that's what you technically have. As I said, it's for business travel and tourism, so that there's a great flexibility in there of once you have that status, whether you're not Canadian citizen and you have a B visa in your passport, or you're a Canadian and you're admitted under B status, you can do both things. And that's usually for a long period of time that you have that visa status. And then you can stay typically for up to 6 months in most cases. So you can do all of this. It gives you a lot of flexibility in what you're doing. You don't have to make a special trip for a visa every single time. It's also a very low cost thing for Canadians. It's basically no cost other than travel itself. For non-Canadians, it's under $200, depending on the kind of visa that you get. And you get that visa once. And as I said, it's good for a number of years. But it's good for this kind of business. Going as a business traveler typically means that you're going for consultations, you're going for meetings, you're going for contract negotiations. Those can be helpful when you're starting a business or talking about starting a business or having a very short-term purpose. But once you get into more complexity, that's where the B visa kind of breaks down. The risks of these are that everybody has to have their own status, their own visa or their own visitor status individually. So if you've got your spouse and your kids, they've got to be able to qualify on their own for another B visa. If you're not a Canadian citizen, you're going to have to get a visa itself. And if you're resident in Canada and you're applying in Canada, you probably have already heard that the wait times in Canada are very, very high. For B visas, it can be about 2 years that you're waiting for this status. Now, around the world, if you're a national of another country and you're applying there, it could be a lot less, but you're still waiting for a number of months in order to get that appointment. You've probably also heard that if you're refused for a B visa, what is called 214B, that you haven't shown that you'll return to the United States in a reasonable amount of time, you'll just get that refusal letter. It's not really going to explain the details of it. This is where you hear stories about people who nobody looked at my documents, they didn't ask me any questions, the appointment was very short. The appointments are always very short. Or the actual interview is usually less than 5 minutes, sometimes a lot less than 5 minutes. So the reason that you were refused can sometimes be very opaque to the applicant, is most of the time very opaque to the applicant. And it's very hard for somebody to come in afterward and try to fix that and apply again. So it's really, really important to try to get it right the first time. And then the other risk of the B visa is, again, while it's good for consultations, meetings, contract negotiations, etc., those are all considered business, but not work. Once you get into productive work, where you're directing a company, you're hiring, you're firing, you are making business decisions, or you're doing productive work for a wage, then you're out of status. You cannot be on the B visa in that. And that's where a lot of Canadian nationals in particular run into trouble, because they travel to the United States under a B visa. They start doing some meetings, and then that quickly turns into a more detailed process. Maybe they're doing more to try to develop their business, and before you know it, it turns into work. And if there's a finding that you are working in the United States out of status or in a B visa, which is not the appropriate status, that can go in your record permanently as something that will bar you or make it more difficult for you to get a visa in the future. So that's why a lot of people move from the B visa, if they're an investor or a director of a business, into what we call the E visas, which are treaty traders and investors. So there's a bilateral treaty between the United States and Canada that allows this. Not every country has this ability, but there's a handful around the world. So if you have a Canadian or a business that is at least 50% Canadian, you can then qualify for being able to get this E visa. The benefits of it is that it basically allows you to run your business, to be a full-time director, manager of a business, or a single entrepreneur of a business in the United States. That allows you to live there for a long time, for a number of years. And it allows you to bring your family along with you. You can have your kids go to school, you can have your spouse work, you can get all of that status to be able to live full-time in the United States. You just apply in the Toronto consular section. You do not have to file a petition for it. You don't do anything with DHS, with USCIS, etc., until you actually enter the United States. And at that point, you have a visa in hand. So there's not really a lot of questions at that point. So doing it in Toronto, doing it at the consular section is generally a lot easier for people than the visas we're going to talk about in the future. And again, the cost is not very high because all you're paying is that initial visa fee. There's no petition cost, which can run into thousands of dollars. So you're generally talking about a few $100s to put this together. Now, the problems with it, or the difficulties with it, is that you've got to put a lot of documents together to justify that you've got a business that qualifies as a treaty trader and treaty investor. You're talking about a 40, 50-page document package with a lot of your, what you would consider confidential personal information. That's all got to be submitted to the consulate in advance. They're going to review that, and then they're going to schedule you for an appointment. Now, you're going to get the appointment very quickly, assuming it's approved. You're probably going to get that appointment within 3 or 4 weeks after sending that documentation. But putting that documentation together is a large effort, and as I said, requires a lot of detailed information to put it together. You also have to be able to show that you've got substantial and continuing trade. Those words are in quotes because that is literally what it says in the law. But there is no dollar amount attached to that. There is no amount that I could tell you is definitely substantial. There is no, even though you could show that you have a growing business or a new business, that you have to be able to show that you have a business that will employ a certain number of people after time. I couldn't tell you how many exactly it needs to show. It's a very subjective requirement. I can certainly give you guidance on that, and an immigration attorney could give you guidance on that, but it's not a hard and fast rule. So like in many of these cases, it's going to depend very specifically on your business and on your situation before we know whether you would be able to qualify under this e-visa. Now, if you are investing under an e-visa, that investment has to be irrevocable. So putting a large amount of money, even at a very large amount of money in a bank account in the United States is not generally considered an irrevocable investment. Just as you put that money into that account, that money could go out of the account. But purchasing something, whether you're purchasing a truck, a piece of land, making a lease on a site, then all of those are considered irrevocable investments. You have made that step in which you could show that investment has taken place. You're not going to be able to easily walk away from that, and you've been able to check that off. And then lastly, you need to be in a position to develop and direct operations. So you're generally not going to be just considered a lower level employee of this. So not everybody is going to, in your company, is going to be able to qualify for an e-visa, but the heads of the company or the substantial investors of the company generally will be. This is a very, very popular visa option for Canadians because, as I said, you're moving from this B visa status where you're trying to explore the options of starting a business, and then you've actually started one and you want to start growing it, and the e-visa is a logical development of that. Now, not everybody is going to find that the e-visa works for them. Another thing that is not unique, but very specific to Canadians and Mexicans is what we still call the TN visa or the NAFTA visa. Now, we all know it's USMCA or in Canada, CUSMA, but the visa law is written the way it was, and it still says NAFTA, so which is why we refer to TN visas, because TN refers to NAFTA. So that's a little bit of a different visa category. Instead of applying for a visa in your passport, most people go to the border, either to land border or to pre-clearance, and they apply for it there. That's a very quick and easy way for most people to do it. Again, with a TN visa, you get full workability to be able to do the work in for your company. You get to bring family members and spouses, and again, the cost is pretty low. The risks there is that if you're a Canadian citizen, that works great for you. If you've got Mexican national citizens that work in your company, that will work great, but it won't work for anybody else. Any non-Canadian citizen can't qualify for a TN visa. But it also has to be what's in the included NAFTA professions or CUSMA USMCA professions. There's a list of professions. I'm not going to try to go through them all now, but they're all published. And if you fall into one of those professions, then it can qualify for that visa, but not everybody is going to find something that fits into that. But once you get that visa, you're going to be in for a shorter stay. It's about 3 years. And then, as I said, because you're applying at the border, I want to acknowledge that a lot of folks these days, for legitimate reasons, are concerned about what might happen at the border if they are found to be ineligible, if they're found to have prior immigration violations, then you're at the risk of being at the border. Now, I would say in Canada, you've got that benefit of pre-clearance. You're still technically in Canada. You are not halfway through your travel. You've just started your travel and you're getting that answer. So it's a lot better off than flying into the United States and then clearing through customs at, say, Washington Dulles Airport before going to someone else or somewhere else, and then finding out at that point that you're not admitted to the United States and you need to be able to find a return trip back out. And then we move into H visas, which are specialty occupations. So H-1Bs is the most common version of the H visa. This has been in the news quite a lot lately. This is a petition-based visa. So what that basically means is that is a two-step process, or at least a multi-step process, because sometimes it's more than two, where you are going to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services and filing a petition with them. And then waiting for that petition to be approved. And then once that's approved, then you move on to the visa process of applying for a visa, and a visa interview in Canada, and then getting a visa at that point, and then you enter the United States. The good part of that is that despite what you may have heard with some negative stories, the majority of people do get approved for those petitions. And so you've got some level of assurance there that you know that things are going positively rather than the prior categories. The risk of that is that it is a two-step process. So it's going to take a lot longer, it's going to be a lot more paperwork, and you're trying to convince basically two different government agencies that you're qualified or your employees are qualified for this visa. Again, derivatives are allowed for an H-1B visa, so you can have your family members, your spouse, your children be able to go. Your spouse will unfortunately not be able to work in most cases. That used to be a little more common, that H-1B spouses, called H-4 visas, would be able to work. That is a lot less common now. But if you do get an H visa, you'll be able to stay quite a long time in the United States. And a lot of people get that H visa and then be petitioned for what's called a green card or legal permanent resident status to be able to get residency in the United States. Some of the difficulties of H visas is that there is, for most cases, a lottery system. So you don't know for certain whether your case will even be considered by USCIS. It is quite literally a lottery. So if there is a numerical cap, you apply for that lottery, your number may or may not be picked. And then, as you're moving through that process, well, what if your number isn't picked? Then you're not going to be able to do the H-1B visa for that cycle. You either need to consider a different visa category or wait till the following year. So that can be very stressful and very difficult for a company to be able to navigate and to be able to predict how it might go. Another peculiarity with the H visa is that the employees are tied to an employer. So an H visa, an H-1B visa will have the employer's name on it. So if you have an H-1B visa in the United States and you leave your employer, then you have a very short period of time, a matter of to be able to find another sponsor or move to a different category. Otherwise, you would have to leave the United States. Now, as an employer, you might find that as a benefit, but I do want to flag that for employees where it is very much tied to the employer that you have. Because it is a position-based visa with 2 or multiple steps, it tend to be fairly expensive just for the fees to the government to be able to file this. I'm saying roughly $2,000 here, but it could be more or less depending on the peculiarities. And of course, more if you want somebody else to file your documentation for you. And then, of course, you've seen H-1B visas in the news quite a lot lately. There is a lot of political interest. It's a bit of a juggling act. There is a large interest, particularly with Indian H-1B visas, because Indian nationals do use the majority of H-1B visas. But these are typically tech visas, and because it is in the news, because of these changes have happened lately, I can understand that some people might be hesitant or reticent to pursue an H-1B visa in the current climate. I do want to address very briefly the $100,000 announcement that came a few weeks ago, or maybe about a month ago now. That is, again, very preliminary. That visa fee is not yet set. No one has paid that fee yet. The structure for paying that fee isn't actually built yet. But one would imagine by next year, when the next lottery happens, that there will be some structure to do that. And if there is a $100,000 fee attached to most H-1B visas individually per applicant, then that would be a huge deterrent for most starting companies to be able to use the H-1B. All right, now we're going to move to L visas. I'm sorry, I am moving very fast here, but I want to make sure that we get through it and then have time for questions. But the L visa is for an intercompany transferee. That is basically some company that is already established both in the United States and Canada. So this is kind of why I picked the order that I picked in order to provide this. So once you are fully established in the United States, the L visa is a very flexible way to be able to send employees from one entity in Canada to the other entity in the United States, or incidentally, an entity somewhere else out of the United States to the United States. It doesn't have to be simply a US-Canada thing. It could be a US, Canada, India, China, multiple countries thing. A multinational company that is trying to send some of its employees temporarily to the United States. This is a very flexible type of visa. You can use it for executives. You can use it for people who have specialized knowledge. And that could be specialized knowledge that's technical knowledge, or it could be specialized knowledge simply in knowing the practices of the business. So they worked at your business for a number of years. They know how your business works and what your internal procedures are. And that's why it makes more sense to send them rather than employing somebody new in the United States. And then also it can be used at scale. So you can file an individual H-1B, an individual L petition for a single person. Or if you think that you have a large number of people that you can send, that you'll need to send, that you can file a blanket L-1B petition that could be used for multiple people, 20, 30, even 100 or more people at once. That's a very cost-effective way of filing a single petition that once it gets approved, you can send multiple people on that petition. You don't have to name each one individually until you get to actually applying for the visa. People on L1 visas typically stay for a long time. They are, again, just like the H-1Bs, typically one pathway to residency in the United States. And then also they bring their families. Unlike the H-1B visas, L visa spouses typically get employment fairly easily, or typically get employment authorization fairly easily to be able to get whatever that they would like to get in the United States. Some of the risks are just like H-1Bs. It is, again, petition-based, so you have to do this two-step process. And again, both entities have to share significant ownership. So it can't be a loose partnership between companies. You can't just find a company that's, say, owned by a family member or a friend of yours, and you create a partnership to be able to do this. They have to actually share actual ownership. And that's something that's checked in the petition process. And then just like H-1Bs, there are higher costs involved here. So as I ran through at warp speed, all of those visa categories, I hope the one takeaway from this is that this is not like painting a room in your house. This is not something that you want to be able to do on your own. This is a get help early, get help often situation. And I don't say that because of private interest. I've said that for 20 plus years as a consular officer. People would come to us all the time with these questions of what kind of visa really works for me, or I'm in this visa situation, this has gone wrong, what do I do next? Unfortunately, as a consular officer, we're not in the position to give advice. However, non-consular officers and immigration attorneys certainly can do that. It is vastly easier to help someone who is early in the process, who is trying to develop their business, who maybe hasn't even thought about filing petitions yet, or whether they should file a petition, than it is for people who come to me or others and say, I've made all of these errors, these people have been refused for a visa, or these visas are stuck, and now what do I do? Unfortunately, we get a lot of the latter. But whenever you can give the earlier, that is definitely preferable. And if anybody has any questions, now would be the time, but I also want to make sure that my contact information is shared there. All right, so I see a couple of questions here. So for the first question, is it possible to obtain a TN visa for a company we own if we register in the United States? Could you please explain the criteria? So yes, it is possible to obtain that TN visa. The TN criteria is largely based on the profession of the person. As I said, it's a list of professions. So the first step would be to look at that criteria and then compare it to the profession of the person. TN visas are a very flexible way for Canadian nationals, again, Canadian nationals, to be able to enter and work. Typically, they're not seen frequently for executives or for investors, but if it's an employee, then a TN visa could certainly work for you. The next question here is, after petitioning, how long does it take to get approval, and why is the application for petition so expensive? Okay, so two questions here. First of all, how long does it take to get approval? Well, unfortunately, this is an answer that I had to give a lot when I was working for the government, and I have to keep giving now, is it depends. It will typically take for a petition a number of months. If it's an H-1B visa and you're subject to the lottery, you need to find out whether you've qualified for the lottery and then qualify for the petition approval itself. USCIS is pretty good about giving updates on when they've taken action on petitions, but typically you're looking at a multi-month process to wait for petition approval. And then once you've got that petition approved, then you have to apply for a visa, which it will depend on how long it takes to get that appointment. You can't apply for the visa and get an appointment until the petition is approved. And then once you get that appointment, that may be a basically instantaneous approval, or it may take time. There could be a delay on that end. Why is the application for petition so expensive? Well, it is a detailed process to be able to go through these. USCIS takes hundreds of thousands every year. and it is a long process to be able to get through them. So it is, I would say it is expensive in the sense of more expensive than a visa application, but it is not as expensive as sending somebody to the United States and paying them for a year. It is a small percentage of that. Certainly, probably a smaller percentage than it is to hire somebody in the United States. The last question I see here is, we are planning to expand via franchising to the United States with our company Detailing Nights. Do I need a specific visa if all the employees will be hired in the United States? So if you're hiring US nationals or other people who already have employment authorization in the United States, then nobody needs a visa, right? So we're only talking about foreign nationals and people who they're foreign nationals, they don't have green cards, they don't have employee authorization in the United States, they don't have the right to work inherently in the United States. Those people would need visas, and in most cases, they need individual visas or individual petitions for them. But if you're planning to hire in the United States and hire American citizens, I would say as a former American government employee, wonderful. We love to see people employed in the United States. We love to see jobs created in the United States, which is, by the way, a lot of the goal here is to create jobs in the United States. I see one other question here. As a Canadian with tech experience, if we own a company that has been operating in Canada for 7 years, we incorporate a new company in Delaware, can we apply for a TN visa right after incorporating in the US? So it depends. It depends on the employee itself. Remember, the TN visa is very dependent on the profession of the employee. So I would be cautious as a Canadian to focus too much on the TN visa, because even though the TN visa is going to work for a lot of Canadians, it's not going to work for every Canadian. So there are quite a lot of Canadians who use H-1Bs and Ls and Es and other types of visas other than just TNs. It's understandable, but incorrect to assume that Canadian equals TN, TN equals Canadian, and that's what you should use. But as far as the question about timing, after incorporating the United States, there's no time delay there. So as soon as you've incorporated in the United States, you can absolutely start petitioning for an employee in the United States. And if I have time for one more question, for myself, is there a specific visa if I'm going to stay in the United States for an extended period while I'm hiring people? So hiring people would be one of the triggers for work in the United States. So if you were visiting sites, if you were having a contract negotiation, if you were having a meeting with a potential investor, that would all be a B1, B2 visa. You can go on a business or tourism visa. Flexibility, you've got time to be able to go, short period, longer period, up to about 6 months, you're perfectly fine. If you are hiring people, then you're going to need some sort of other visa category that gives you a work authorization, which could be an E, it could be an L, it could be an H-1B. It's really going to depend on your specific situation. My guess is if you are founding a company in Canada and you would like to expand it to the United States, or you already have a small company in the United States that you would like to grow and be in the United States for a while to start hiring people, you're probably going to move toward an E visa, which is going to be not as lengthy to take to get in process than an H or an L, but there is a lot of documentation involved there, and that's something that that a professional could help you with. Abedin, how am I doing on time?
You're good. You're good.
I'm good? Okay.
So,
all right. So I have another question here. If Canadian investors invest on American tech companies more than 200,000 in the United States, can they apply for an E-visa? So that's a great question, because it gets to the significant, the language that I mentioned about significant investments in the United States. Having a number there, I think to most of us we would probably say $200,000 is a significant investment. I am cautious to be able to say they would be able to get an E-visa, because it is very subjective, and it's going to depend on a number of other factors. I think with a more with an individual consultation, we could talk about what level an investment might be considered significant. Some of the things that go into significance isn't just the pure money value, but it's also the breadth of operations in the United States, how much you're going to be able to develop over time, what is your projection of how much you're going to be able to grow, how many people might you be able to employ in the United States, but also what is your sector and what is considered a significant investment in that sector. What is that $200,000 going to be used for? So investment could be a very broad thing. So it's really going to depend. It's another it depends answer, which I'm sorry is going to be a lot of these answers. But it is that you're getting in the right direction of looking at an e-visa for that kind of work. Got a flood of new questions. About how many more minutes do I think I have?
I think we're almost at time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to grab one last of these. Okay. So the very last one I think is a good question. Our company sends installation technicians to train U.S. workers on how to install our system. Thus far, we haven't had any issues at the border. As long as we are training and not installing, are we okay without a visa? That is a great analysis of how to use a B1, B2 visa. Yes, in general, that is what we would consider, what an immigration professional and a consular officer would consider as an appropriate use of a B1, B2 visa. You are showing and not doing. When you go to a site and you are talking to somebody, giving a presentation, or even watching someone install something, that is probably going to be okay. If you're supervising the installation, or if you are hands-on in any way, or certainly if you are deriving any income from a U.S. source, if you're getting income from the U.S. branch of that company or the U.S. client directly to the employee, then you're going to run into problems with that B1, B2 visa, and then you need to start looking at an H or an L or something else. But if you are just providing training, just providing presentations, and installing a system and technicians typically tend to be a little more black and white than perhaps other types of workers that is a little more fuzzy, then you're probably going to be on fairly good ground. And the fact that you haven't had any issues at the border is a great thing, although it's always good to have good conversations with your employees, because after travel to the United States or pre-travel to the United States, we're not always at our best. We might not always be able to explain the work that we're doing and do it in an erudite way. So it's really important to get a few bullet points out there and to be able to have the employee be able to say on their own, independently, what they're going to be doing, not providing documentation that frankly not really anybody's going to read. So they need to be able to advocate for themselves in that. But it sounds like you're on the right track there.
Perfect. Thank you, Ian. Thank you for the presentation and for your answers, and thank you everyone for all your questions. Next, we have Matt Geeson, the Director of Global Investment Strategy at Edge Partners. As a former SelectUSA portfolio manager, he helped deliver over $18 billion in the U.S. investment projects during his tenure. With his experience across Asia and Latin America, Matt is a seasoned cross-border investment advisor with deep expertise in helping companies enter and expand in the U.S. market. Matt will now outline 5 key pillars that Canadian companies should consider when investing in the U.S.
There we go. Unmuted now. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome today. Let me just get this back up and running. Perfect. All right. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon. Today, I'm going to be walking through the core elements of building a successful U.S. expansion strategy. There was going to be 5 pillars that we're going to be going through today. So we're going to be understanding market, identifying risks, and making evidence-based decisions. The United States remains the most dynamic investment destination in the world, but entering it successfully requires careful planning and local insight. So without further ado, we'll head to the next slide. So in short, why the U.S.? The U.S. economy exceeds 25 trillion U.S. dollars, representing almost a quarter of the global GDP. It's home to world-leading institutions, technology, advanced manufacturing, clean energy, and life sciences, and offers deep capital markets and an exceptional talent base. However, it's not a single uniform market.
Sorry to interject. Your slide deck, you need to expand it. It's not forwarding. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Is this better?
Yep.
Okay. I'll keep it like this and not do the full screen. Okay. Right. So as I was mentioning, the offers deep market capital markets and an exceptional talent base. However, it's not a single uniform market. With 50 states and 6 territories, each jurisdiction has its own laws, taxes, incentives, and labor frameworks. Culturally and regulatory differences can dramatically shape performance and businesses' operations as they continue to try to expand in the United States. So entering the US isn't just about choosing the right industry, it's about choosing the right region, regulatory environment, operating model, and the right partnerships, which we'll get to in one of the pillars coming up. So I'd like to discuss very briefly the 5 most common reasons that US expansions fail. So roughly 70% of foreign expansions in the United States face delays or underperformance. The main reasons have been pretty consistent over the clients that we've worked with. Insufficient market understanding, generic business plan that's not tailored to not only just the industry and sector, but also to the location physically in the United States. Misaligned operations is another one that we often see. A disconnection between the US operations and the headquarters can often result in a variety of missteps, but also at the same time, delayed implementation of the business plan as well. Regulatory missteps and weak partnerships. So understanding these pitfalls is the first step towards avoiding them. And these are the first 5 main reasons that we always discuss with clients during the conversations when companies are looking to expand to the United States. So our first pillar is market intelligence. This is where we begin. The most successful expansions start with data-driven market intelligence. Every decision, the location, pricing, product adaptation, this should be rooted in objective research. Effective market intelligence looks at demand trends, competitive landscape, labor costs, infrastructure, tax, and regulatory conditions. This analytical foundation replaces guesswork with measurable insight, ensuring that strategic decisions from marketing to logistics are grounded in reality and not just on assumptions. For our second strategic pillar, bespoke business planning. Once the data from market intelligence is clear, the next step is a tailored business plan. The US regulatory and tax environment varies dramatically from state to state and territory to territory, and even down to the municipalities. Different counties will have different tax environments that you'll have to navigate as well, let alone the state. And essentially, a plan that does not reflect local realities can fall apart very quickly. For instance, California's AB5 legislation changed how companies classify contractors, which affected labor costs. When it comes to food producers, for example, they need both FDA and USDA approvals before entry. Ignoring details like these can stall operations for months, if not longer. A customized plan should continue to have accurate financial projections, legal compliance mapping, and an operational structure that matches the US market conditions for industry and location. So for our third strategic pillar is site selection and incentives. Location decisions often define an expansion's success. A strong site selection process weighs logistics, workforce, and supply chains incentive programs. Choosing the right state or region can accelerate launch times, sometimes by half a year or more. For example, an auto supplier selecting Georgia over California reduced both costs and permitting time. A key part to this site selection process is the incentives negotiations. This would include tax credits, workforce grants, and infrastructure support that can offset 10 to 30% of project costs when approached strategically and when developing key partnerships at the state level and also at the local levels in addition. The right location is not just about the geography. It's about maximizing the long-term efficiency, longevity, and the resilience of the company once the investment and operations are successfully in the United States. For our fourth strategic pillar is building the right support network. No company succeeds in the US alone. Expansions require coordinated expertise from corporate attorneys, tax specialists, HR consultants, CPAs, and incentive advisors. A fragmented approach leads to compliance gaps and delays. A synchronized advisory team ensures consistency in contracts, hiring, reporting, and financial planning, saving months of time and substantial costs. Think of this as building the infrastructure of expertise around your company before you take those first major steps in the United States in setting up operations. And lastly, our fifth strategic pillar. Beyond compliance, long-term success depends on relationships. This is the key part of the work that we do. Companies that engage with what we see is that when companies engage with the local and state level governments early on will obtain permanence faster. They have more public support within the community, and there's better incentives when engaging early as opposed to later. Collaboration with universities, chambers of commerce, and trade associations also helps companies integrate into the community before setting up operations in the United States and builds a brand credibility ahead of time. These public-private engagement is not a soft skill, it's a strategic advantage that reinforces the sustainability and the adaptability of your company into the US market. So before I finish up, just want to go over a very brief case study of SelectUSA. So this is a Swiss energy storage company. Very briefly, their initial plan focused on the U.S. Northeast for their proximity towards a major research and development hubs. But deeper analysis revealed that the Northeast was not going to be an adequate location for the company. Indiana offered a faster permitting time. There were lower costs. There were industrial workforce and incentives as well. So by shifting location, this company was actually able to accelerate their launch by 10 months. They reduced a variety of different startup costs, and proving that the data-driven flexibility can transform outcomes for companies and significantly reduce time for entering the United States. This is where I'll be closing on my presentation today. So in short, to summarize, it's important to treat the United States as 50 distinct markets and 6 territories, those markets as well. Base decisions on data, not assumptions, and build a custom plan that fits local frameworks, invests in strong local partnerships, engage proactively with government and community stakeholders. These steps don't guarantee success, but they dramatically increase the odds of a smooth, profitable US entry. If you'd like to get in touch to have more conversations with me about this, I'd be happy to. My information's here. You can also scan the QR code to get in touch with me. Happy to be contacted over WhatsApp as well. And if you'd like, I'm able to be happy to share the presentation with you afterwards as well. Thank you so much, and I look forward to learning more about your questions. Let's see. So I think the first one, our company sends installation technicians to, or that's not the one.
No, that's visa related, I believe.
That was visas.
Yeah, I think the remaining ones are visa related. Matt, I don't know if you had some sort of common questions queued up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's common questions that we've run into that I'd be happy to share is when it comes to first finding locations and identifying where companies will need to begin. One of the biggest, I guess, errors that we run into is a general assumption about certain states. Some companies will think that they need to be close to a specific research and development hub due to a university being nearby, and so they only will fixate on a specific state or a specific city at the end. And ultimately, one of the key things that we see is that companies will need to take a step back and have a better understanding of the United States as a whole, looking at the industry clusters, because these industry clusters can be located around the United States. And there's a few other questions that I have had recently that I can share as well. There's 2 more. Another one would be when it comes to the tax incentives. One of the key right now, especially in terms of tariffs that we have been running into, is a number of companies seek to, they think that the free trade zones is an immediate solution for being able to potentially work around tariffs and maintain their profitability in the United States. And what we see is that some states actually also continue to, or considering shifting towards being able to provide other types of incentives. So companies are willing to work around the FTZ and not in the FTZ instead. So they're able to have them, instead of narrowing down to only free trade zones, these incentives would be allowing companies to pick other parts of the state, even though the tariffs are impacting their business. And for a third major question that we've had is about maintaining these relationships. So this is always a key part of the work that we've been able to do with our clients is when it comes to just state level, we're able to have these types of conversations with the economic development organizations, but it's important to get down to the level of distributors, for example, depending on your business. We had one manufacturing company that specifically needed to have an understanding of the distributors within the region and develop relationships with them as well. So companies will need to have a really great understanding of what their needs are before even entering into a state or into a local area, and asking for help and looking for incentives. If you're coming prepared to have those conversations, you're going to have much more greater success.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Matt. So finally, now we move on to the final session of our phase 1 of the 9th annual SelectUSA Canada Conference. 12 economic development organizations from across the US will now present the business opportunities and benefits in their respective regions. First, we have the Cedar Rapids Economic Alliance from Iowa.
Well, thank you, Abedin. Good afternoon. I'm Juliette Abdel, CEO of the Cedar Rapids Regional. This region is located here in the Midwest in the state of Iowa, the great state of Iowa. We consider our region in the top and one of the fastest regions across the US. And we've been ranked nationally #1 for opportunity. In addition to some of what our coastal partners have to offer, we have no traffic, no congestion, a great cost of living, or very low cost of living that's here, and of course, a wonderful quality of life. We've listed a few off on the left portion of this slide, some of the incentives that we have here to offer as a region and state, our high quality jobs, industrial types of newer jobs that are created, R&D credits or credit or incentive that we have at the state level. And then what we consider kind of the mega investment, which is really more of legislation that's allowed us to have some large scale type of manufacturing, bioscience, and research projects as well. There are 4 other credits that are not listed on here that we have, and those are generally in the space of biofuel, energy, and just new companies that have chosen to expand into our area. Below this, you'll see kind of our business climate listed, and that is what we have in terms of tax and regulation. We have had increasingly over the last several years sought to reduce taxation on our industry partners, and you'll see that there's no tax as it relates to sales, property, inventory, personal property, even computer software types of taxes, and our corporate tax as well. We also have a single factor type of taxation structure as well here in our region. Our region does represent about 7 counties, and I'd be remiss to also share that's 87 different municipalities that we also have to kind of put out there for you all. We're incredibly accessible and connected, so you can reach us via rail, air, and truck. We do have an FTZ, which is that foreign trade zone that's located here at our airport that directly connects us, of course, to several different states here in the US, nearly 20. Within a 4.5 hour drive time, we're reaching that nearly 38 million in population to serve our direct region and our community. Outside of those, I did want to also highlight over on the right-hand panel of this slide, kind of our trade relations. We've been very proud to emphasize that we have about 15 international countries that have actually invested in our region. But the #1 trading partner that we currently have is this Iowa-Canada relationship. And I'd be remiss to mention that we have over 200 different Canadian-owned companies that actually invest here in the state of Iowa. That's equating to about 4,000 employees that they have chosen to hire in our community. Couple other quick things. We are the #1 kind of export products per capita as a city here in the US, and we also have the most engineers per capita in the US. And in Iowa, our slogan has been that welcome is our language. So I hope that this gives you a quick overview of our region and the different opportunities that we have and our key industries that are listed below, of course, for your general knowledge, the top 3 being in the aerospace, bioeconomy, and tech sector, although we are known for our agriculture, manufacturing, and just overall business and professional services.
Perfect. Thank you, Juliet. Next, we have the Delaware Prosperity Partnership.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Kopostecki. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager for the Delaware Prosperity Partnership. Our website is choosedelaware.com. So if you want to learn more, please visit our website. Most people know Delaware, especially most people internationally know Delaware for for incorporating in Delaware. 81.4% of all US IPOs are registered in the state of Delaware. And we have nearly 2 million business entities incorporated in Delaware. That includes 68% of Fortune 500 companies. And companies ultimately choose to incorporate in Delaware because of our internationally respected business law system and our business courts. But what we like to tell people is that we are also a great place to locate. If you need to be on the East Coast, if you need access to New York City, Washington, D.C., other major East Coast markets, we are very strategically located and we are a lower cost option. We're 1.5 hours from Wilmington, Delaware to New York City and to Washington, D.C. By train. We've got access to 5 international airports and 5 international shipping or container ports within 2.5 hours. And that provides you with easy, direct access to all major markets in the US and most major markets internationally. Our biggest kind of incentive is our tax environment. We have no sales tax, no personal property tax, no inventory tax, no equipment tax, and no value added tax. That makes a very strategic, cost friendly environment to locate in. In fact, we were named as the #1 state for capital intensive manufacturers and the #2 state for labor intensive manufacturers by KPMG and the Tax Foundation. Our personal tax burden is also significantly lower than neighboring states. Not to knock neighboring states, but our personal tax burden is certainly lower than our neighbors, as well as most other major markets in the US. We're centrally located. We've got 100 colleges and universities within 2 hours, and that includes multiple major R&D hubs, as well as 2 Ivy League schools. And finally, our key industry sectors, the companies that are locating in the state, are companies that are doing work in life sciences, advanced chemicals and materials, biopharma, clean tech, fintech, agriscience, and then small and medium-sized manufacturers. Delaware is home to companies like Merck, AstraZeneca, Agilent, DuPont, Air Liquide, Goldman Sachs, Siemens Healthineers, JP Morgan Chase, and Chemours. So we've got major players located up and down the state, and we are open for business. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. Next, we have Empire State Development from the state of New York.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. Great to see so many people joining us today. My name is Lisa Harding. I lead on the foreign direct investment inquiries for Empire State Development. I'm British Canadian. I've actually been in Toronto since 2016, so I'm here in Canada and happy to take any inquiries from you. We don't have much time today, and I'm not going to go through every bullet point here, but I do just want to draw your attention to my contact details. If there's anything I cover today and you're interested in learning more, please look for me on LinkedIn. It's the fastest way to get hold of me. Just search Lisa Harding Canada. The reason why is there are many people called Lisa Harding. Or email me. I'm going to cover the industry strengths as well if we get time, but just a few highlights. The state of New York is #1 for reshoring manufacturing jobs, #2 for semiconductor patents, and also #3 for clean energy patents and bioscience related patents as well. So, you know, there's a lot of knowledge-based economies here. It's very tech forward, but also manufacturing as well. A little bit about New York State. We've got around 20 million people. It's the 4th most populous state. So great location for those wanting to access the consumer market here, maybe for food manufacture, furniture manufacturer, etc. And it's the 9th largest economy in the world, so pretty sizable. Its advantages include it has 0% corporate income tax rate for certain qualifying manufacturers. It's important to maybe catch up with me to learn more, and also 0% sales tax on items such as manufacturing machinery, equipment, and energy. Again, there's certain criteria which I can go into detail for you. And also in terms of access, I'm going to cover a little bit about the industry strengths if we have time, but you know, one of the key things for us is we have innovation and development support across all of our sectors. There's a lot of specialist centres there, links to universities, and of course a breadth of talent as well, with some of the highest qualified people in the country. In terms of the sectors, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. In terms of manufacturing, you'll be looking at things like food processing and food manufacturers, very strong, but also advanced technologies like 3D and robotics, which support customized productions. And in terms of clean tech and renewable energy, energy storage systems are playing a crucial role in New York State's clean energy future, with over $350 million in state and federal funds to accelerate their adoption. So, you know, very key for those people in those sectors. Biotech and life sciences, there's $620 million dollars in life science initiatives and the development of specialized facilities. And then, of course, when you think of New York, you often think of New York City, very strong still in financial services and fintech in particular. And for any startups, there are areas such as the Flatiron District, which offer pretty affordable spaces for any companies that want to accelerate fast. I think we're running out of time, but there's a bit more on agribusiness as well. And also in terms of tech and electronics, I do want to highlight photonics and semiconductor manufacturing is key for us. The state has attracted over $124 billion in semiconductor investments, and it's home to a robust optics and photonics industry, so particularly in the Rochester area. So very important for anybody, particularly on the border. We do have an extensive border that's shared with Ontario and Montreal. So for any companies that are looking to access the US market, quite simply in terms of geography, then, you know, please do reach out to me. And yeah, look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Next, presenting Select Florida.
Thanks, Abedin. Thanks, Lisa. And nice meeting with all of you. Thanks, the Assistant Secretary, for attending the initial presentation. So my name is Paulo Magalhães. I'm Canadian based here in Montreal. So Select Florida, it's the international arm of the Department of Commerce of Florida. So we have 18 offices across the globe. I lead operations here in Canada with offices in Montreal and Toronto, but we do cover the whole Canadian market, from the Maritimes to British Columbia, every and the territories as well. So really eager to meet with you all in person in Toronto in November, if you have a chance. So as my colleagues mentioned, there's not too much time. It's a lot of people, a lot of information going around. I'm going to focus on 4 reasons why to establish in Florida. I would say the first obvious ones, the size of the economy. Florida is a $1.4 trillion GDP company. If it was a country, it would be the 14th largest economy in the world. It's also the most internationalized economic hub, one of the most internationalized hubs in the world, the most connected of the Americas by far. So companies expand to Florida not only to expand to the US, but also to expand to Latin America. I'm Brazilian by origin, and I can attest to the fact I used to represent the Brazilian trade office here for East Canada for 5 years before, and I can attest the best way to expand to Latin America is to expand to Florida. I guess that's why they hired me. On the points that we want to touch is the incentives. So the reasons why to establish in Florida, the size of the economy, the size of the state. So we cover the whole state. So we would assist the companies in connecting with the resources in any region in Florida that they choose, even to consider and compare different ones. We focus in a few industries: manufacturing, aviation, aerospace, defense, military, homeland security, IT, clean tech, life science, logistics, and financial services and professional services. So we do have a diverse pool. We do have assistance for virtually all of these sectors, and we can assist the companies in making their access to the United States and hopefully to Florida as easy as possible. To just mention a few other things like talent, Florida is the highest development of higher education talent in the United States, with over 110,000 graduates of bachelor's level program. Also the highest producer of STEM program. Also, Florida is the largest creator of new ventures as well in the US. And the employment growth, for example, in tech, surpassing 3% last year, compared to the average growth of the country. About incentives, we can discuss that in more detail, but we do have our Select Florida manages directly $16 million in R&D tax credits, and this is initiated by my team and myself here in Canada for the Canadian company. So you can explore these incentives before. Also, if you create jobs, five jobs or more, 10 jobs or more, depending on the case, there is between $2,000 to $6,000 as a tax credit that you can access that from year one that you establish in the state. I won't push it longer. We can discuss in person as well, and I'm available through LinkedIn. You can connect with me. My pleasure connecting with all of you, and feel free to access the website as well, selectflorida.org, or my email, selectflorida.ca, paulo.magalhães. Thank you all for the time.
Thank you, Paulo. Next, we have the state of Illinois.
Here we go, Devin. We're on.
Go ahead, JJ. We've got the slide up for you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect, JJ.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. My name's Jeffrey Johnson. I work for the State of Illinois Canada office here in Toronto. I also have with me this afternoon my colleague Devin Swan. One of the mandates of our office is to work with Canadian companies that are looking to expand into the U.S., either through a sales office, a distribution center, or a manufacturing plant. And we encourage companies to look at Illinois as a site for that expansion. Why Illinois? Illinois is often called the Prairie State or the Land of Lincoln. It's a very diversified state with both manufacturing and agribusiness as well as farming. It's a global economic powerhouse. 35 Fortune 500 companies are located in Illinois, and Illinois is the 18th largest economy in the world. There are 2,600 foreign firms that are located in Illinois currently, 420 of which are from Canada, which employ 44,200 Illinois workers. Like Toronto, Chicago is one of the key. In this respect, there are 2,640 food processing producing companies that are located in Illinois, many of which are located in the Chicago metropolitan area. Consequently, food processing sector is one of the major focuses of our office in Toronto. The state of Illinois is also very strong in advanced manufacturing, life sciences, and the digital economy. Illinois is centrally located and globally connected. We like to say that Illinois is a logistical capital of North America with its nexus of air, water, rail, and rail connections. Every major international market is accessible to Illinois, including all Canadian cities. Illinois has an abundant and qualified workforce. We have a significant renewable energy ecosystem and competitive electric prices. In Illinois, Governor Pritzker is very keen on renewable energy projects and the climate change mitigation sector, including the EV supply chain. We do have a thriving innovation ecosystem, including the development of quantum computers, again, a world-class infrastructure system, and government support. We can offer site selection. There are also workforce development programs in Illinois, and state and local tax incentives and economic incentives based on job creation and job retention and capital investment are available to expanding businesses. So we look forward to seeing you in person on Monday, November 17th in Toronto, where we can chat in detail about the advantages of a location in Illinois. Thanks very much, and we're all hoping that the Toronto Blue Jays can win again tonight.
Thank you so much, JJ. Now presenting the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Caitlin Klauser with the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'm so excited to introduce you all to a U.S. region that many Canadian companies already know very well, which is Tennessee's capital, Nashville. Canada is at the heart of Tennessee's global partnerships as our #1 trading partner, with more than 360 international companies already located here in Nashville. We'd love to see even more Canadian firms find their home throughout our region. To give you a quick snapshot of the bigger picture happening here in Nashville currently, our region ranks among one of the fastest growing economies in the U.S. That momentum comes from a powerful mix of central location, a pro-business environment, as well as a highly skilled workforce. On top of that, we also offer competitive incentives and a culture of innovation that continues to fuel this growth and investment from all around the world. I quickly want to highlight one of the industries that's driving this growth, which is advanced manufacturing. Nashville has become a magnet for advanced manufacturing, especially in the automotive industry, as we are right in the middle of Tennessee's automotive corridor, surrounded by major OEMs and a strong network of suppliers. Companies here benefit from competitive cost, reliable logistics, as well as the ability to reach 75% of the U.S. market within a day's drive. Whether it's automotive components or advanced materials, Nashville offers the workforce, infrastructure, and partnerships that manufacturers need to scale quickly. Of course, manufacturing is just part of our story. Another major pillar of our economy and where Nashville really stands out is healthcare. As many of you may know, the Nashville brand is centered around music and entertainment, but what truly drives our economy is the healthcare industry. More than 500 healthcare companies are based here within our region, including national leaders in behavioral health, senior living, as well as outpatient care. That gives Nashville incredible reach and an influence across this industry. Also, as our tech sector continues to grow, with Oracle's new global headquarters, just one of the examples, Nashville has become a hotspot for many companies blending health and technology. It's one of the most exciting and innovative markets in the U.S. right now for digital health and data-driven solutions. Lastly, beyond our established industries, Nashville is also building tremendous momentum in innovation and entrepreneurship. For Canadian startups and scale-ups, Nashville offers a connected, collaborative environment where business grows very rapid. Our Entrepreneur Center, accelerators, universities, and investors all are working together to help new ventures succeed. And because our community is so accessible and relationship-driven, international companies can plug in super quick here and start building those partnerships from day one. All this to say and wrap up is that the Nashville region is a thriving U.S. hub for advanced manufacturing, health innovation, and entrepreneurial growth. We offer Canadian companies a central connected base with the talent, incentives, and support needed to succeed. And we'd love the opportunity to explore how Nashville can be your U.S. home and how we can help your business continue growing right alongside our region's success. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Next, we have the Chamber of Commerce of Greater Philadelphia.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Hello from Philadelphia, which is the first capital of the United States. Many Americans don't even know that, so now everyone on this call should. I'm speaking to you from the heart of the region that I represent, which is the Greater Philadelphia region, which exists at the intersection of southeastern Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey, and northern Delaware. We work very closely with Delaware Prosperity Partnership, so hi, Megan. Good to see you. Philadelphia's region is the 7th largest workforce in the United States. So when it comes to sourcing your talent, we have it here with over 130 institutes of higher learning within the region. You're also going to be located directly in the middle of the Northeast Corridor. We are a highly connected region, connected by Amtrak to the entirety of the whole system that Amtrak runs. But we're also a 5-airport metropolis, with Philadelphia International Airport being American Airlines' East Coast hub, with a tremendous amount of flights to Europe, to Canada, and other parts of this hemisphere. Highly connected region. You'll also find yourself within that Northeast corridor with real estate that tends to be 40 to 60% cheaper than a lot of our competitor regions. So compare this to New York City, compare this to Boston, where you still have the ability to get on a train and be up in either of those, either in an hour to New York City or 5 hours to Boston, come back home to Philadelphia at the end of your day selling. Likewise, Philadelphia is a major hub for various industries. You find us within the state of Pennsylvania, where throughout the state, the governor had set an economic development plan a year ago that outlined 5 different industry areas. For those of you who don't know, Pennsylvania has the most diverse industry range of any state in the United States. However, we've identified 5 priority sectors: manufacturing, robotics and technology, energy, agriculture, and life sciences. And life sciences is really a nod to Greater Philadelphia, to the Philadelphia area. We are a huge life sciences hub. We are known as Silicon Valley because we are the birthplace of both cell therapy and gene therapy, boasting a tremendous number of cell therapy. About 80% of global cell therapy companies are in Philadelphia. We're also a huge historical pharmaceutical hub. Likewise, 80% of global pharma have a presence in our region. So if you're a life sciences company selling to pharmaceuticals, looking to biomanufacture, or doing anything in advanced therapies, this is a home for you that's very, very affordable, where you have tremendous talent. Other industries where we do very strongly are food and beverage, processing, packaging, and distribution. Because of our strategic location with access to the Northeast, the Midwest, and the South, we end up being a huge distribution hub with the fastest growing port in the country in Philadelphia. We also have the largest refrigerated port of any port in the United States. We import a tremendous amount of meat and fruits and vegetables that get distributed throughout the US. So if you're doing any trade coming from South America, Canada, or Europe, this is also a great market for you if you're doing anything by barge. Likewise, aerospace and auto parts manufacturing, historically very strong here. Behind me, you see some of the largest private employers within our region. You'll see Boeing up here. Likewise, very strong in the chemical sector, as Megan from Delaware enumerated, with Dow and DuPont. GlaxoSmithKline over here for pharmaceuticals, Lockheed Martin, a number of other partners that I'd be happy to run through with you when I meet you in Canada. But I think overall, there's a great factoid too. Though we're very industry diverse, we're also recognized globally by Startup Genome as the number 13 global startup hub globally. So if you're a small business looking for a place to expand, land, and grow, I'm happy to talk to you about that as well. So thank you, everyone. Looking forward to meeting you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Next, we have the Greater Phoenix Economic Council.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here and share a little bit about why Greater Phoenix has become a really strategic and exciting place in North America for Canadian companies expanding into the US. My name is Julie Reese. I'm a business development manager with the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, or GPEC. We're a regional economic development organization in the Greater Phoenix Metro of Arizona, and we specialize in helping companies from across the world learn the value prop of our region and expand their operations. So I'll provide a quick overview on the strengths and advantages of our community. I'll start with location. Greater Phoenix is right in the heart of the US Southwest. It's perfectly positioned between major West Coast and Mountain West markets like Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and Denver. And from where we are, you can reach more than 35 million consumers within a single day's drive, which makes it a pretty ideal logistics hub for distribution, manufacturing, and supply chain operations. Next, I'd like to bring up talent. Phoenix has a really large, diverse, and highly educated workforce supported by great institutions like Arizona State University, which is one of the largest public universities in the US and has been ranked #1 in innovation for 11 years in a row now. ASU's engineering school also has over 32,000 students enrolled. And across our 3 major public universities, Arizona graduates more than 9,000 engineers every year. We also have the Maricopa County Community College District, which is one of the largest in the US with over 100,000 students. And Maricopa Community Colleges is an incredible partner for companies looking for skilled workers who don't necessarily need 4-year degrees. So, whether you need engineers, technicians, or specialized operators, you can build a strong team here. And then from a business standpoint, Greater Phoenix is known for being very affordable and easy to do business in. We have low operating costs, a very straightforward regulatory environment, and a state government that really supports business growth and resident livability. In fact, Arizona recently adopted a flat personal income tax of just 2.5%, which is one of the lowest in the country. Next, Phoenix also has a very vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. There is a strong culture of innovation here and collaboration among different sectors, and this is all supported by accelerators, incubators, public-private partnerships, and so on. The city does rank within the top 50 global startup ecosystems, which says a lot about the level of talent, investment, and collaboration happening here. And finally, we offer a very stable environment, both economically and literally, with over 300 days of sunshine each year. Weather disruptions are minimal, and our infrastructure for water and energy is reliable. I think our grid has been ranked, one of the top in stability in the US. And so our region is really built out for growth. And some of our top industries include semiconductors. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company has invested $165 billion in the region, which I think is one of the largest FDI in US history. We also have a legacy in aerospace and defense, a huge bioscience and life sciences sector, climate technology, and so on. So I'd be happy to share more information on those existing ecosystems in another conversation. But in short, our region offers what every growing company needs. We have a prime location, skilled workforce, very business-friendly environment, and it's all in one of the fastest growing economies in the US. And, let's not forget the outstanding quality of life. Everywhere you look in our region, you can see views of palm trees and mountains. So we would love to help you explore how your company can plug into this ecosystem, connect with partners that can support your growth goals, and build a strong US presence. My colleague, Casey Gilchrist, she is our Vice President of International Business Development. She will be at the upcoming conference in November, so please be sure to connect with her there or reach out on LinkedIn beforehand. And of course, you can reach out to me as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Next, we have Shale Crescent USA.
Hi, I'm Gren Kuzer. I'm the Director of Marketing for Shale Crescent USA. We are just across Lake Erie from you. When Shale Crescent USA was at SelectUSA this year, Wednesday morning, we talked to a lot of manufacturers that week, and Wednesday morning, a lot of them showed back up at our booth, and they said, "We are confused. Can you help us since you're regional in scope?" And they said, "We've been here for 3 days, and we're still confused. Every state says they're #1. And what we explained is, in manufacturing always follows energy in the history of the world. And the closer you can get to your energy, the greater is your economic advantage. Taxes and incentives are great, but you still got to make a profit. And the location you select is obviously very important. The Shell Crescent USA organization is a regional economic development organization. We're a marketing and we do marketing and research. We work very closely with the states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. And that region, these 3 states, we have branded as the Shell Crescent USA region of the United States. This 3-state region is the birthplace of the American oil and gas industry, the chemical industry, the glass industry, the steel industry, and the rubber industry, and manufacturing in general in the U.S. because of our long-standing ability to provide energy. Today, the Shell Crescent USA region provides 1/3 of the nation's natural gas supply. Almost 70% of the new natural gas that's produced in the United States is coming from this small 3-state region of the United States. And if you can see the graph of the chart on the left there, but if Shell Crescent USA, these 3 states, folks, were its own country, we would be the number 3 natural gas producing country in the world. The only places that produce more natural gas than these 3 states are the rest of the USA without Shell Crescent, and Russia is number 2. And because of that, we're sending a lot of natural gas liquids and natural gas to even to Canada. And of course, the big difference there is to get it to Canada, there's a transportation charge that U.S. companies don't have to deal with. But economic development packages can go away, but location does not. We look forward to meeting you in Toronto, and we're happy to share with you how locating in the Shell Crescent USA region can give your organization a long-term fundamental advantage. We have a CEO of a company from India that's currently located, they're under construction in the Ohio River Valley. And he made this statement to us. He said, I have built projects all over the world, and I've always had to decide, do I build where my feedstock and energy is, or do I build where my customers are? This is the first time in my long career I've never had to make that choice, because the customers, which is half the US population, this is the only place in the world where a company can locate on top of its feedstock and energy and be in the middle of the largest economy of the world, the largest growing economy in the world here in the United States, 50% of the population and a lot of Canada's population. So in his long career, this is the first time he's never had to make that choice, and he was thrilled. Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to seeing you in Toronto, and make it a great day.
Thank you so much, Greg. Next, we have the South Carolina Department of Commerce.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amanda Lucas, and I'm a senior project manager with our global business development team at the South Carolina Department of Commerce. While South Carolina may be familiar to you because of a visit to one of our beautiful beaches, or perhaps you've played golf on one of our 350 plus golf courses, today I am here to share why you should think of South Carolina when considering entering the U.S. market. Canadian companies Magna International, TD Bank, and Mark Anthony Brewing already call South Carolina home. Due to the powerful combination of economic incentives, logistical advantages, and our business-friendly environment, South Carolina offers world-class infrastructure. Its proximity to U.S. markets like Atlanta, Charlotte, and Miami make it the gateway to the Southeast. The Port of Charleston is one of the busiest and most efficient on the East Coast, with the deepest harbor and direct global shipping routes. Plus, our extensive rail and highway networks ensure goods move quickly and cost-effectively. With low corporate tax rates, streamlined regulations, and an aggressive incentive structure, South Carolina consistently ranks among the top states for doing business. The state actively works with international companies to reduce red tape and fast-track success. And that includes expedited permitting, tailored tax credits, grants, and our cornerstone training program, Ready SC. Our vibrant economy is built on advanced manufacturing in the automotive, aerospace, life sciences, and energy sectors. And our South Carolina workforce is arguably one of the best in the country. Institutions like Clemson and the University of South Carolina, as well as our 16 technical colleges across the state, partner directly with industry to build the skills of today and for the jobs in 5 and 10 years down the road. With lower labor costs, companies can see measurable cost savings without sacrificing the quality. In closing, South Carolina represents a smart, strategic expansion opportunity for Canadian businesses ready to grow in the U.S. market. One of the fastest growing states, it is a place where employees want to live and where businesses can thrive long term. In addition to our Southern charm, you will find open doors, available sites and buildings, and a state that actively wants you to succeed. And we look forward to having a more in-depth conversation with you at the November in-person event. My colleague, John Baggett, will join you all on that day, and really appreciate allowing me to speak, and look forward to hopefully hosting some of the companies in South Carolina in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amanda. Next, we have the St. Lawrence County Industrial Development Agency from New York.
Well, good afternoon and thank you. My name is Bob Allfield. I'm one of the business development specialists here at the St. Lawrence County IDA. As Lisa Hardy mentioned, who's one of our partners at Empire State Development, we are a part of the 9th largest economy in the world, in part of New York State. We're located in the northwest corner of New York State. Also want to say thank you to Assistant Secretary David Fogel. We at the IDA work very closely with his company that is still operating and doing very well in the town of Messina. We offer a strategic location with access to the world markets, US markets, and Canadian markets. Outside my office window right now, I can be in Ottawa, Ontario in an hour and 15 minutes. We have 2 bridge crossings, one of which you see here on the photo. That is the Prescott-Ogdensburg Bridge, International Bridge. That's about 45 minutes from downtown Ottawa. To the north there, about 30 miles, is the Seaway International Bridge in Messina, New York. That connects Messina and Cornwall, Ontario. So from Messina, New York to Montreal, you can be there in about an hour and a half. Canadian companies can set up their operations here in St. Lawrence County and be home for dinner at night. We offer power, land, water, and natural resources, a foreign trade zone in Ogdensburg. The Moses Saunders Power Dam, located in Messina, generates 880 megawatts of power. It is a shared power dam with the province of Ontario. 16 turbines come our way to the United States. 16 turbines serve Ontario as well, and Canadian power generation. A productive and capable workforce here in St. Lawrence County, 45,000 workers. To give you an idea, in land area, our county is larger than Delaware and or Rhode Island. With that, though, we are a smaller population, a little over about 110,000 people. Within the county, we have 5 colleges and universities, 10,000 students here every year. Clarkson University in SUNY Potsdam, a state college in Potsdam, New York. Here in Canton is SUNY Canton, along with St. Lawrence University. We also have a forestry school in the Southern Adirondack Mountains in Wanakena. Aggressive tax training and financing and energy incentives are available. We have pilots, sales and use tax exemptions from multinational corporations and micro enterprises. In Messina, we have Alcoa and Arconic. Corning has an operation here in Canton, New York. Also, you may have heard about it recently, Empire State Mines, Titan Manufacturing in Gouverneur, New York. They are a zinc manufacturer, also expanding into the graphite space right now at this time. So manufacturing, agriculture, renewable energy, financing and fintech, food processing, education, technology, and tourism. We have it all here in St. Lawrence County. Very much looking forward to meeting each and every one of you in Toronto on November the 17th. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Bob Allfeld, AHLFELD, or email me at ballfeld@slcida.com. And thank you very much for allowing us to do the presentation.
Thank you so much, Bob. And finally, we have the Virginia Economic Development Partnership.
Thank you, Aberdeen. Now, being the last one here, I'll try to make this quick because I know everyone's been hanging on for quite a long time. Really, so just as a point of introduction, my name is Kevin Miller. I'm with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. I lead the team that will primarily engage at the front end when companies are considering expansions that are considering Virginia, really to learn more about what the company's doing and sharing about information about Virginia and how we can fit into those strategic plans. At a very high level, we see a large amount of variety in the types of businesses that do operate in Virginia. We have a large number of headquarters operations that are concentrated in our urban areas. Anything from, Amazon HQ2, which was a large economic development search here in the US a few years ago, Boeing, Hilton, many of the top aerospace and defense companies, both from the US and internationally, are headquartered in Virginia. We also see a large diverse manufacturing community that then is located in other parts of the state. We're seeing a lot of activity in aerospace and defense manufacturing, in ag tech, and with a lot of the greenhouse activity that does emanate out of Southern Ontario. We see a lot of controlled environmental agriculture in Virginia, food and beverage in general. Seeing a lot of activity in life sciences, and for companies that do operate in this space, both from a supplier standpoint and from in like a hyperscaler operation side. Virginia is home to the largest data center cluster of industry in the world. As you think about locations in the US, our strategic location in Virginia really sticks out. We're at the midpoint of the US East Coast, with access to major population centers to the north, from Washington, D.C. up to New York and Boston. And, with that being centrally located, we also have access to some of the high growth regions to the south, Charlotte, Atlanta, et cetera. And we sit adjacent to Washington, D.C. Really just kind of that key stat there is you can reach nearly 50% of the US population within a standard one-day truck drive. As we're talking about access and infrastructure, another thing to highlight is our airport infrastructure. For those folks that do sit in Canada on the webinar, if you have flown into Washington, D.C., you have actually flown into Virginia. Both of the airports that do operate primarily serving Washington, D.C., Dulles International and Reagan International, both sit in Virginia. We also have the third busiest and most automated port complex on the US East Coast in Virginia, which allows for the import of materials and the export of finished goods direct into and from Virginia. As a state, we have invested over $300 million in about the last 4 years in site preparation. And that's really to ensure that we have a comprehensive portfolio of business-ready sites ready for companies, so that when they're ready to move quickly, we have that portfolio of sites ready to go when companies have that need to expand. Virginia also tends to rank highly in these best states for business rankings. A few highlights to include really just kind of align with our goal of being the top state for talent in the US. In the last ranking by CNBC, we were named the top state for education. We also hold the #1 ranking for workforce development programs, currently from both Area Development and Business Facilities magazines, which is a recognition of our Virginia Talent Accelerator program, which is a incentive for companies expanding, which allow for custom recruitment and training for companies that are expanding into Virginia. So just really high level now. Look forward to talking to many of you next month in Toronto. Hopefully we can connect and really discuss how Virginia can fit into those growth strategies in the US. Thanks. Great, everyone. Thanks again to all of our speakers. Thank you, our 12 EDOs who participated with us today. David Olson, David Fogel, Michael Pereira, Namir Halak, Ian Hopper, and Matt Geeson. I did want to circle back to November 17. This is our in-person conference in Toronto. Everybody on this webinar will be receiving an invitation and also an application for setting up one-on-one meeting appointments with the EDOs during the November 17 conference, which will include, again, extended deep dive presentations, private lunch and keynote with Ambassador Hoekstra, one-on-one speed dates. Again, that application will be sent out in the coming days. And then I also wanted to highlight, again, that same evening, if you're free to join us on the evening, November 17 is the 2025 AmCham Canada Thanksgiving dinner. Details are on the AmCham website, amchamcanada.ca. But with that, listen, thanks for joining part one of this year's SelectUSA Canada conference. Look forward to seeing you all here in Toronto in a little over a month. Thanks again.